Good afternoon, everyone. I am at-large City Councilor Ruth Louis-Jean. We are here for a Boston City Council hearing of the Committee on Civil Rights and Immigrant Advancement. Today is December 5th, 2022, at 2 p.m., and I am the chair and sponsor for this hearing. This hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, FiOS Channel 964. We also have interpreters available in the chamber for anyone in need of translation speaking Spanish. Spanish, you raise your hand just so that folks can see you. Spanish interpreter? Oh. Awesome, thank you for being here. Portuguese and Haitian Creole. And I will be repeating that several times throughout the hearing, and if I don't, remind me to, so that if anybody who walks in is able to listen in the language that is most that is best for them. And just so you know that anyone listening, Spanish is on the Spanish translator Maria Bastardo, Portuguese Roseanne Rose, and Haitian Creole is Marie Louis-Dor. Spanish is on channel 1, Portuguese is on channel 2, and Haitian Creole is on channel 3. We will be taking public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you are interested in testifying here with us in the chamber, please sign up on the sheet near the door. If you are interested in testifying virtually, please email the Central Staff Liaison, Megan Kavanaugh, for the link at Megan, MEGHAN, .Kavanaugh, KAVANAGH, @boston.gov. Written comments may be sent to the committee at ccc.civilrights@boston.gov and will be made a part of the record and available to all counselors. Today's hearing is on docket number 1148, order for a hearing on the needs and services for migrant populations. This matter was sponsored by myself and was referred to the committee on September 21st, 2022. I'd like to thank all of you for being here in one capacity or another. I've had the opportunity to speak with you about the issues that our city is facing with respect to our migrant communities and also our immigrant communities. And we know that our communities are facing pressing needs, and it deserves and merits the attention of us here on the Boston City Council, and it also merits the attention of all levels of government. We know that immigration is a federal issue, but we experience it first here at the local level. And so we'll be talking about what it's going to take to really build strong city, state, and federal relationships to really address these issues. As many of you know, Boston has seen a substantial rise in the number of migrant families seeking shelter and asylum over the past not only just months, but the past years. And we know that there are factors that are really pushing folks out of their countries of origin or countries where they have migrated to themselves to seek shelter and flee persecution. They come here seeking refuge, many of them leaving unsafe living conditions, looking for life-saving medical treatment, or simply looking to make an honest living where they can support their families that they've left behind. We have had a troubling past when it comes to how we treat our migrant communities here in the United States, even as recent as last fall when we saw the U.S. Border Patrol agents on horseback attacking Haitian migrants at the U.S.-Mexican border on whips. As early as February, I filed a resolution calling for the end of Title 42, a xenophobic and racist Trump-era policy that restricted immigration and that resulted in the summary expulsion of folks at the border. I believe, and many advocates believed, and many people here in this room argued that that activity just demonstrated the anti-Blackness at root in our immigration policy, and advocates all over the country organized around this issue. But ending this restriction is only the beginning. We have a lot to do to make sure that once migrants arrive here, they have the support they need to live whole lives. Our hospitals, as many of you know, as the experts on the ground, our hospitals and homeless shelters are absorbing much of the intake. Our community organizations are the front lines, absorbing a lot of the impact of our new arrivals and really doing the impossible. And while we've seen a dramatic increase in demand for services, and while we have been trying to meet the moment, the volume requires us to do a lot more and requires us all to be leaning in a lot more. Emergency assistance, service providers, housing shelter, medical needs, food security, and other programs are going to need more support. And that is what this hearing is about. It's also about the needs of our young kids, and how we're really addressing the issues of trauma that they're facing when we talk about integration into Boston Public Schools after experiencing disrupted learning. If we're expanding services, we must ensure that we're doing so equitably. We should be working in solidarity with everyone, with all immigrant communities, but I won't stand for actions that really sideline certain immigrant populations in favor of others. Culturally competent services at all of our shelters and with all of our service providers is critical and a top priority of ours to ensure that we are being sensitive to the needs of those who need it the most. I do not believe that anything is a zero-sum game. We can look out for our neighbors. We can look out for those who have been here for generations, and we should be looking out for those who are new arrivals. Massachusetts and this city have the capability and the resources to make meaningful resources available. We just have to find the willingness to do so. So again, I just want to commend everyone for being here, for all the groups that I know that are always working in solidarity with with each other, and for really trying to be creative here on how we find solutions. I want to thank my colleagues for being here. I'm going to turn to Council President Ed Flynn if you have any brief remarks that you'd like to make. We are trying to we do have 3 panels. So I'm just asking that we just keep it brief in the beginning so that we can move on to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Louis-Jean. I'm not going to provide an opening statement. I know I'm going to rather hear from the panelists, but I want to say to you, Councilor Louis-Jean, thank you for bringing this matter forward. Thank you for the incredible work you're doing in support of immigrants throughout Massachusetts. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Councilor Liz Braden, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also will keep my comments very brief. Thank you for sponsoring this very important hearing. I think how we welcome and support our migrant families and folks who are fleeing very, very desperate situations is a measure of our values and our commitment to civil and human rights. And also, Boston always sort of leads in many spaces, and this is a space that we can demonstrate our leadership in caring humanely caring for our migrants who are fleeing very desperate situations across the world and who need our support. And thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Chair, and thank you to the panelists that are here. I just want to start off in gratitude. I want to really thank Councilor Louis-Jean for being a loud voice and always on the front lines as it relates to all things immigrant advocacy. And so really excited to be here and more importantly to be a partner with you all in this work. Thank you.
Thank you to my colleagues for being here and for the work that you've done in this space as well. I have an absence letter from my colleague who cannot make it today, Councilor Gigi Coletta. I'm going to just read her letter into the record. She says, Chairwoman Louis-Jean, I regret that I am unavailable to be here today in order to keep everyone else healthy as we head into the holiday season. She's a bit under the weather. I wanted to participate remotely, but we are restricted by strict open meeting laws in a post-COVID world. This subject matter is incredibly important to my district, especially in East Boston, where we have welcomed dozens of individuals from Central and Latin America with open arms. Over just the past 4 months, upwards of 6 to 10 families arrived in East Boston at the local police station, neighborhood health center, and community organizations seeking assistance. Many of them fled their homes to escape violence or extortion and in search of economic opportunity in this country. Many of them have walked thousands of miles through harsh terrain and in flip-flops with almost no resources or personal belongings. The City of Boston has stepped up and we've come to these families' aid, working in partnership with Natalia Benitez and Gladys Oliverios of the Office of Neighborhood Services, Chief Sheila Dillon of the Mayor's Office of Housing, Phil Giffey of East Boston's Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Eastie Mutual Aid, and Monique Nguyen at Moya, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. I understand that there is vital work being done to close some of the service gaps we've already witnessed the last couple of months. We must prioritize more resources to temporary house migrant individuals and families, find them long-term and stable housing, and ensure they have access to reliable and healthy food sources. Thank you to my colleagues for putting this forward, administration panelists in attendance, and to community partners in their work every day. Kindly read this letter into the record. Best, Councilor Gabriela Coletta, District 1. I want to thank my colleague for my letter. I'm going to turn over to my panel, but I just want to also give a further context as to why this hearing order was filed. We started having these conversations about the need our migrants and immigrants communities were facing in our budget hearing and in ARPA, where I fought for allocation for temporary housing for migrant communities. And then we saw what happened in Martha's Vineyard with Governor DeSantis' actions really engaging in questionable practices of human trafficking by flying folks from Florida to Martha's Vineyard. And when that light started to shine on that, I said, let's shine a light on the entire issue so that we understand, so that we are educating folks and so that we are able to meet the moment with the resources that are required and address this humanitarian issue. So I want to thank everyone who's been working on this, whether there's been media spotlighted on or not. It's important that we do the work to be our brother and our sister's keeper, and all of you here in this room are doing that. So I want to turn now to our first advocate panel. We have with us here Liz Sweet, the Executive Director of the Mirror Coalition. We have with us virtually Dr. Gabo, who is the founder and Executive Director of the Immigrant Family Services Institute. We have with us Marian Albert, Staff Attorney at the Lawyers for Civil Rights. We have with us Girfo Fleurissant, also known as Pastor Kiki, the Executive Director of Haitian Americans United, also doing a lot of work with Equity Now and Beyond, the True Alliance Center, and Immigrant Family Services Institute. I'm not sure if we have Eloisa here virtually. She's here, yes, from the Brazilian Women's Group. Thank you for being here. And we have Bishop Nicholas Homasil from the Voice of the Gospel Tabernacle Church. I'm going to turn it over to the advocate panel now. You'll each have 5 minutes for opening statements, and then we'll turn to my colleague for questions. So, Miran, if you want to kick us off. And if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, I apologize. Please correct the record.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marian Albert, and I am a staff attorney at Lawyers for Civil Rights. Lawyers for Civil Rights works with communities of color and immigrants to fight discrimination and foster equity through creative and courageous legal advocacy, education, and economic empowerment. In partnership with law firms and community allies, we provide free, life-changing legal support to individuals and families in immigrant communities. I respectfully submit this testimony for today's hearing, docket number 1148, in support of providing much-needed resources to immigrant populations. Lawyers for Civil Rights represents the migrants who were fraudulently induced by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and flown to Martha's Vineyard. In light of an escalating wave of hostility against immigrants, we urge the City of Boston to support the immigrants in 3 concrete ways. First, because there is no right to appointed counsel for immigration proceedings, we strongly urge the City of Boston to dedicate resources for low-income immigrants to retain immigration attorneys. The U.S. immigration system is vastly complex and can be challenging to navigate. For example, an individual eligible for asylum must apply within their first year of arrival. Without this basic knowledge, many asylum seekers could face daunting barriers to immigration protection and relief. Similarly, immigrants will need help with obtaining employment authorization and work permits to fully integrate into our community and to contribute to our economy, particularly as we face unprecedented pandemic-related labor shortages across industries and sectors. It is imperative that we help connect immigrant families with legal counsel as quickly as possible to ensure their success and their well-being. Second, we urge the City of Boston to allocate funds to provide comprehensive mental health support services. Immigrants are incredibly resilient, and they've endured long and treacherous journeys to reach our city. Many flee gang violence, state-sanctioned torture and prosecution, and alarming rates of femicide. As a result, they are in need of free mental health support to unpack the complex trauma that they have experienced. Third, we would urge the City of Boston to create and maintain an interdisciplinary community outreach, engagement, and communication process. This would allow community-based advocacy groups and government officials to interact and respond in real time to incidents like the Martha's Vineyard humanitarian crisis. This process can be leveraged to address community needs as they arise, disseminate information and resources, and coordinate emergency response efforts. Immigrants are a vibrant part of our communities and an integral thread in Boston's social fabric. LCR applauds the forward momentum on this issue and urges the City of Boston to provide the necessary resources to adequately assist our immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I turn to you, Jeff Fleisan, Pastor Kiki. Oh, okay. We're first going to go to Dr. Gabo from the Immigrant Family Services Institute in Mattapan. Thank you for being here with us, even virtually, Dr. Gabo.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Madam Chairman, and with everyone else who is here listening to, all of us as advocates and community leaders in terms of, working together to make sure that we welcome our new immigrants, which I call our brothers and sisters, with love, compassion, and dignity. And as you know, IFC is the Immigrant Family Services Institute. We have been a leading agency welcoming new immigrants, especially those who are coming from Haiti, from the borders directly to the great city of Boston. First, we want to applaud you, Madam Chairman, for putting this panel together and for organizing this hearing, because every day as we do our work, we realize that so many people, so many leaders, even so many elected officials do not understand what it means for you to leave your country behind, to come to a new country and to learn everything about this new country, to adapt and also to integrate. And that's one of the reasons why we are so grateful to the city of Boston. Since last year, the minute that we heard about the new wave of immigrants, when we reached out to the city of Boston, to the mayor's office, especially to the mayor's office of immigrant advancement, their ears were wide open to listen to us, to hear the stories of those families who have been coming to our doors every day. And with them, we have been able to do so much as a very small community-based organization. So just around one of the big item agenda, housing. So IFC, again, through the support of the city of Boston and even through your support, Madam Chairman, we were able to welcome over 200 families and, rent places to put those families so that they are not left, outside on the street. And so many of those who have been coming with us, their journey has been nothing than brutal. They spend so much time, traveling through the jungle, through so many different parts of the forest to make it here. They lost so much through their journey. And that's one of the reasons why one of the biggest things that we are asking for the city of Boston to continue to advocate and to continue to provide resources for is around mental health. Culturally competent mental health programming to really support the needs of those families who have lost so much and who have spent years and years traveling and sometimes to 10 to 12 different countries before they make it here. Housing remains one of the biggest challenges that we face here at IFC. Welcoming families every day, that's the same story that we hear. We need a place to stay. We don't know where we're going to sleep tonight. And we believe this is the time for us to really urge the city of Boston to work closely in partnership with organizations like us to secure more units, more housing, to identify vacant places, to identify those, big mansions that are out there and where there is no one in there, to identify those places so that we can make them available to families. This is a huge need for us, and every day we are facing with the same sad reality. And just so you know, between September of last year to today, IFC has done over 3,000 intakes. Over 6,000 intakes of new families who have been coming to our doors. And we know with the condition of Haiti, more and more families are coming. So this is the time for us to organize. This is the time for us to be ready. And I believe one of the biggest challenges that we had when the new wave of new immigrants started to come is our lack of preparation. Although we call ourselves a city of immigrants, but we have no plan in place to welcome immigrants when it's time for them to come here. And I think the city of Boston has a very great reason to be a leader in welcoming immigrants. And that's the reason why I applaud all of you, elected officials, all of you leaders who are working around the clock to really make space for new immigrants. And I heard from other cities like Florida, New York, and even Chicago. I heard that they want to learn from us because they saw the work that we've been doing here in the great city of Boston. And I think it's a great opportunity that we should not pass to work together as, like an integrated part to welcome those families. So yes, we need help with housing. Yes, we need help with mental health. We need help in general with access. Culturally competent access to services, whether or not it's medical, whether or not it's school, whether or not it's workforce development. We need to build capacity with those local organizations so that families do not have to ask for interpreters when they are sharing, their burden. They need to be able to say those things in their own language, feeling comfortable. So that's one of the reasons why I applaud this initiative. And as a leader in this community, I really want to work with the city of Boston so that we can be one of the pioneers, leading the way to show the world how we welcome new immigrants with compassion, with respect, and with dignity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, as always, Dr. Gabo. I'm going to move on to Therefore Florissant, Pastor Kiki.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairman, and thank you all the city councilors here, our friends of Haiti, and always stand with us. Just as the chair of True Island Center, Haitian American United Incorporated, and Immigrant Family Services Institute, I've seen firsthand the hurdles facing those families, because I receive those calls when they are in the border, traveling to Boston. It's a new wave of immigrants that do not have any family connection with Boston, which is different than what we had seen after the earthquake in 2010. So some of the earthquake victims came, they have family ties, but those who came have no family ties, and it definitely a big burden for all of us to assist them. But I'll not say burden, I'll say opportunity, basically, to assist them. Because as the gospel said, whoever knows the right thing to do and fail to do it is a sin. So that's what we have seen. But based on what my colleague, Dr. Gabo, said earlier, I've seen the need to continue for better advocacy campaigns to push both the states, the city, and the federal entities to be more inclusive when it comes to immigrants who are coming from the poorest countries like Haiti and also other Central American countries as well. Just number one, for my recommendation, I would say we need access to shelter with cultural competent staff to support new migrants' needs. As you heard it, housing remains a top priority for new immigrants who are here most of the time with no established network here in the city. So we need to continue to advocate for decent, culturally appropriate systems to house those immigrants in a way that is conducive to their full integration. Number two is, as you know, it takes at least a year or even more for those migrants to have access to work permits. We are so grateful to the administration because most of them basically, the majority of them have been granted humanitarian parole, making them eligible for work permits immediately. So that's another big item that creates a real handicap to integration, to access to employment. So therefore, the city definitely could work with the states and the congressional leaders to making sure that they expedite the processing of those work permits so that those families will not definitely remain on public benefits. They'll be able, after 3 to 4 months, to be able to find work, because there are plenty of work in the state of Massachusetts. And number 3, we will definitely just request from the city, the state, the TPS extension for those migrants who will have their TPS expire in February 3rd, 2023, a couple of months, and to redesignate Haiti again for TPS. As Dr. Gabo mentioned, 3,000 people, 6,000 people now are in need for protection. If Haiti is being redesignated, so those people will be sheltered from deportation. So therefore, we will definitely need that to happen. Extension for the new TPS recipients, and also redesignation of Haiti for TPS, because conditions continue to worsen in Haiti. And then the fourth things I would definitely just request from the city is to not only to support more housing developments, to build more housings, but also to build supportive housings. As you know, we had that crisis before. Many families are in the brink of being homeless. So we need definitely just to support those families by building supportive housings. We have a great opportunity with the Shattuck redevelopment project that could definitely house more than 300 units with wraparound resources. We need definitely just to push those projects so that more families would be taken off the streets, but also being able to have access to all wraparound resources. And lastly, I would definitely continue to push that to increase the IDP from 13% to 35%, so that we can definitely help up more of those not only new arrival immigrants, but also many Black and brown communities around Boston. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Pastor Kiki. And just for those of you who don't know, the IDP is the Inclusionary Development Policy that requires developers in the city meeting certain limits, minimum limits, to build affordable units as part of their development, or to pay or to build them offsite, or to pay into the city's ability to build affordable housing. I'm now going to move on to Liz Sweet, Executive Director of Mirror Coalition.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and to the entire committee for calling this important hearing today. My name is Elizabeth Sweet, and I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, or MIRA. MIRA Coalition's mission is to convene, serve, and organize together with our members, community leaders, and allies for the advancement of all immigrants across the Commonwealth and beyond. While MIRA's mandate is statewide, we provide direct services from our offices here in Boston, and many of our member organizations and partners are also based here. Boston is a city with a rich immigrant history that attracts and welcomes diverse talent from around the world. We are so grateful for the city's investment in welcoming newcomers, particularly through the effective Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement and so many other city offices. However, we are here today to recognize that those existing resources are insufficient to meet the needs to continue to welcome these larger numbers of immigrants that are arriving seeking refuge here in Boston. Given the trends at the border, we anticipate continuing new immigrant arrivals, and therefore the continuing need for services for those new immigrants. Services that help immigrants connect and access initial services and benefits in the city are particularly critical. Those include, as so many have already mentioned, access to affordable housing, legal services, ESL classes, and job readiness programs. It also includes support for new school enrollment. And while we recognize that the City of Boston has taken important steps to develop language access for city services, we want to highlight, as many others have already done, how critically important culturally and linguistically appropriate services are for all new immigrants. As new immigrants continue to arrive in Boston and throughout Massachusetts, we call for the continuing need for coordination at both the city and state level. MIRA appreciates the initial efforts from the City of Boston and encourages that we continue to engage both with the nonprofit community and immigrant service providers, particularly those community-based providers, and of course with the state. Many new immigrants, especially those who've experienced arrest and detention, express real fear about interactions with law enforcement or anyone in government. And so that continuing partnership with nonprofit providers who are so often who new immigrants reach out to is critically important. We also emphasize the importance of legal representation. Boston already implements the Greater Boston Immigrant Defense Fund, but those funds are truly insufficient to meet the needs. The number of cases pending before the immigration court here in Boston have increased significantly in the past year to more than 107,000 pending cases. There's simply insufficient legal services capacity to meet that need. And we know from so many studies that have been done nationally that legal representation in immigration both means that cases can move more rapidly, helping immigrants therefore become eligible for more services, and also often relates to the final outcomes in those cases. So this is a truly critical area for investment. We also wanted to lift up that we have been hearing of delays in getting new children enrolled into school. These delays, we understand, relate both to vaccine and health access, and also, unfortunately, at times to unstable housing. In terms of addressing vaccine access, we've seen one positive example of traveling clinics. For example, there was a traveling clinic from MGH, which was able to provide vaccinations and other health services in Chelsea, and this type of model may be effective in helping reach more children to enable them to be enrolled in school more promptly. And finally, we want to add our voice to the many panels who've already addressed housing. Affordable housing remains a critical challenge for so many immigrants here in Boston. And we would point to that as impacting both longtime immigrant residents and new arrivals. MIRA's member organizations report significant concerns about shortages of affordable housing. And many of those who are currently in housing face real risks of eviction due to rising rent costs. Rental relief, similar to the relief fund during the COVID pandemic, could help ensure that our neighbors could remain in their homes. We would encourage the city to consider cash assistance programs without restrictions based on immigration status or other approaches to help provide eligibility to immigrants to remain in their housing. Finally, we want to thank you all again for your time and consideration and express that we are ready to continue to partner with the City of Boston to meet these and so many of the challenges facing immigrants. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Sweet. And I'm going to move on to our last, we also have someone virtually, sorry. And I believe, let me just make sure.
Eloisa.
Yes, Eloisa Maria Galvao, the Executive Director of the Brasilia Women's Group. Hi, Eloisa, thank you for being with us today.
Hi, I'm sorry, let me open my camera. Hi, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I don't want to repeat what everybody has said before me, Dr. Gerald and Liz from MIRA and Pastor Kiki. I really want to talk from the perspective from the community. We are based in Alston, in Brighton. We are in Brighton, which, we work with this community here. And what we have noticed in the last maybe year or so is that the community, the Brazilian community is increasing in Alston and Brighton. The other day, I was so surprised that we got a call from Brighton High asking for support for the students, Brazilian students. And I asked, how many students do you think you have? And she said, I think about 100. And I was like speechless because I worked for 20 years for the Boston Public Schools, and I don't remember having 100 students at Boston High. I remember having 100 students at the old school in East Boston, but not Brighton High. It was like 20 something. So, and they all new arrived. I mean, so these are one student with a mother, a father, and siblings, so a family. And the other thing that I want to say that we distribute more than 600 farmers coupon in Austin and Brighton, and you know they all went to Austin Brighton families, and they were like, I mean, the minute we would announce we have the coupon, you can come and get it. In 2 hours, the coupon would be gone. We haven't seen this. We have distributed farmers coupon before. And we have done clinics, vaccination clinics, since March of 2020 for COVID, but we have done all over. But we have done in Austin Bright at the Brazilian Women's Group, at the Sister of St. Joseph, at St. Anthony's Church in Austin, at the Gardner School. And what we noticed too, we give away 25 gift certificates. And what we noticed is that many come because of the gift certificate. The word of mouth goes that they are giving gift certificates, so the people come. We are not giving 25 anymore. We're giving 50 or 75 because 25 doesn't buy anything. So my point is here is what I see in the community is a huge need for housing, for food, mental health support, legal support. These people have hearings. They have to go to Burlington, and they have no idea what it is, what that means. So they need support, but where to go for legal support? We do have a lawyer who inform, you know, she get in touch with people to give them information, to prepare them for their case, or tell them what they can expect, but she doesn't take the case. And we all know how hard it is now to access not only health, but also legal support, you know, lawyers, because they're all overwhelmed. And so my point here is that the city has to think about sustainable answers to all these needs. But meanwhile, we really need the city to look at this population. They are not going to stop coming. They will continue to come. And the need is greater and greater. The other day, in the summer, July, I think, the Office of Counsel, Liz Brandon, helped a lot with a family, a mother with a baby. I think he was younger than a year old. And another one that was 7 years old, that was living in an infested apartment here in Austin or Bright, I think it was Austin, with bed bugs and cockroaches. The situation was awful. You can't imagine how bad it was. She said the boy, the 7 years old, was being eaten up by the cockroach and the bed bugs in the night, during the night. And the Office of Consul Brandon helped a lot to send an inspector from the city to make sure that the landlord would fix the violations, because the landlord wanted the family out. He didn't want to fix anything. So what I want to leave here is that I really hope, and the city of Boston has done a lot during the pandemic, you know, to help, to give people access to help the community organizations such as Brazilian Women's Group with funds that could provide service to the community. But unfortunately, the need is greater and greater each day. So please think about this when you appropriate funds, and think about sustainable in the short run. But right now, we do need to support families with legal, with mental health, with food, and other services. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Eloisa. I appreciate your comments. And now we're going to move on to our last panelist. And I hope those who are virtually remain virtually because we're going to come back to you for your questions. But I'm now going to turn it to the last panelist for this panel, Pastor Nicolas Homicile, who I call Bishop Nicolas Homicile, who I call Pastor Nicolas, but to everyone here is Bishop Homicile.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and thank you to every city council. Thank you to every elected official in Boston and everybody who advocate in behalf of the immigrant. What I have to say is already said by all the panelists who spoke before me. I would simply add to what I have seen on the situation of the new immigrant as a pastor of a church and also a director of community center in Mattapan. We have seen the flow of immigrants who's coming to Boston. I thank Boston for being a leader in welcoming immigrants. I listen to news, I see what's going on in different other states, and I heard how they receive immigrants, but the way Boston welcome to immigrants, not just the immigrant, but Boston, Massachusetts is always the champion almost of everything. I remember when that was in 89, 90, when there was, Mattapan was highly in crime, and I was a part of the organization called YPP, Youth Policing Partnership. And they were designed in a way for the pastors to work shoulders to shoulders with police. And we used to go in the park to talk to the gang members, people who doing the violence. And after Boston was the champion, I remember I heard other states want to come, they came to follow the example how Boston deal with it. So Boston is always the champion of everything. And I thank God for being here in the city of Boston. The new immigrant is really a tragedy. In the church, we rent a large building that's where our church located and the community center, who used to be a warehouse for construction. That's where we have the church, and that's a part of it. We've been receiving a new arrival immigrant. I purchased a folding bed card to have them sleep overnight sometime, and open the doors also for them to spend the day, because sometimes they have no place to go if they don't have any housing yet. The hardest part of the situation is the housing situation. It costs so much. Even it's hard for the new immigrant, but the resident of Boston who's already lived there for a couple of years, because of the high cost of the housing, some of them evicted, some of them cannot pay, they're also in the street. So our church been enduring a lot of hardship about that. And we do not have really finance to do that. Last month I received a call. I believe it was someone who called me on behalf of Boston BMC, asked me if I would open the door to accept people to come and spend the day, then they could go to sleep at night. I was willing to do so, but with the high cost of energy to heat the building, it's a large building, for them to spend a day, that costs a lot, and especially we do not have funding. Unfortunately, with the pandemic who came, a lot of people kind of still shying to come back to church. So the church doesn't have much resources to do that, as well as our community center. So I would urge the city of Boston, as they already do the best, but to continue to work harder to make housing more affordable and more available for the immigrant and also for the residents in Boston. And also, if possible, to just release some resources also to the small organizations like churches also who have been invaded by the immigrant, but lacks of resources to take care of them. So as we all working together, we could make Boston always the greatest city and the city who's always willing, giving a welcome to immigrants. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bishop Palmasil, and thank you everyone for your testimony. I'm gonna steal the words, I think, of Eloisa from the Brazilian women's group, who stated that what everyone has stated is that we need a sustainable solution, a sustainable response to meet the responses, the housing needs, the legal needs, the mental health, address the trauma that so many of the migrants come here with, and to also meet the educational needs of our young kids. And so that call to action is very clear. It was also very heartening to hear almost everyone talk about the great work so far the city has been doing to really support our organizations and the work. And that's a credit to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. It's a credit to the City Council that is really constantly and consistently pushing on centering the voices of those who have been marginalized, and time again, that is our migrant and immigrant communities, and the work that we do to really also build solidarity among our different immigrant groups, which Mira works a lot on, which Lawyers for Civil Rights through your litigation do a really great job of. And I think it's a question of realizing how outsized the need is and seeing how we can match that. So I am now, I'm going to ask my questions last, and I'm going to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions for this first panel. I'm going to turn it over to City Council President Ed Flynn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and again, thank you for your important work and leadership on this issue, Chair, and thank you to the panel for your important work as well. I think the Bishop mentioned the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement is 35 years old. This month, actually, in December, was established under Mayor Flynn 35 years ago, next week, I believe. So just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's been involved in this issue for so many years. Councilor Louis-Jean brought up an excellent point. People often consider immigrant-related issues, immigrant issues, federal issues, and they certainly are. But as city councilors, we often receive calls from immigrants, and it's our responsibility to support them the best we can. So maybe my question, maybe it's a general question to any of the panelists. What can the city council do better to work closely with you, and what can the city council do to work closely with our state and federal partners as well? But what's the best way for us to work with you to make sure our immigrant community is treated with respect and dignity?
if you don't mind, I can start. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's a great question, and I think that's one of the what is happening right now is basically one of the steps in the right way. Having community leaders, having those who are part of the community to be part of the conversation so that we can address, those very, very important questions. Because one of the big mistake that we tend to make is to really make decisions for people who are not at the table. And I think by having immigrant leaders with you in a panel like this, by even inviting some of the new immigrants who are here to hear their stories, to hear their voice, I think those are part of the right step, the step in the right direction in terms of understanding their challenges and understanding their issues so that we can bring them up to the next level. One of the irony of what we have seen around elected officials and others is that so often there are issues that they are not aware. They don't know a lot about those issues, and having conversation where we can bring those issues, explain them, and bring the people who are benefiting from the service or who are in need of those services. I think that those are step in the right direction. And connecting with local organization, at least one quick sheet fact, understanding what are the biggest issues, what are the biggest challenges. I think those are the things that we should do on a regular basis to make sure that we understand how to best support. And the last thing that I would say is, being very intentional about building infrastructure for community-based organizations, because at the end of the day, the community-based organizations are the one at the forefront. They are the first, door where new immigrants knock at. So the more we build their infrastructure so that they can be present and serve those families, I think it's the better. So for this, let me stop right now because I know that other panelists have some ideas, but I think having open and honest conversation like this one is important. Thank you so much.
Okay. Let me echo again the importance of for the city to connect with the grassroots organizations, building their capacity, making funding available for them because they are closely working with those migrants and know what the issues are. So no restrictions in terms of those fundings, they'll be able to assist and serve the immigrants. Number two, we definitely, since for the past 2-3 years, working closely with the Office of Immigrant Advancement regarding the immigration issue, when it comes to TPS issue, what's then can be done to continue to extend TPS, but more importantly also how the city can connect with the state and congressional leaders, let them know exactly how important it is to expedite processing all those immigration papers immediately. Because as I said, those immigrants are ready to work and they are able to work, but there are preventions that they can't access job readiness. But the city can definitely work with the immigration counterparts to making, congressional counterparts to making sure that they put pressure on USCIS to expedite processing. They could do 1 day or 2 day processing of those authorization cards. They don't have to wait 6 months or a year to process those immigration cards. And lastly is also to create all the infrastructure. Those immigrants can be trained and job trainings, learning the language so that they can be extremely ready so when those jobs open in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Madam Chair, I don't have any further questions. I just want to add one more comment. One other way we could help as a council, which we have obviously in the past, but I'll continue working with my colleagues that are here and also the colleagues that are not here, during budget process for the city of Boston, which will be starting several months from now. It's important that we look at the departments that play a key role in supporting immigrants, such as language and communication access as well, obviously Office of Immigrant Advancement Housing, but it's important that we all work together and we make sure that departments that support immigrant rights are fully funded as well. Just want to say thank you to the chair for the important work you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for the work that you've done on behalf of immigrant communities. I'm going to move on to Councillor Braden from District 9, if you have any questions for the panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I have to step out for another meeting, but I really want to thank all of you here and the other panels that are coming. Immigrant, it's a huge human potential that we have coming to our doorstep, and we can assist and support the immigrants who are coming, have them English language classes, and get their kids enrolled in school, and really give them a hand up, but it's also helping us as well. Like, I know from the Haitian community is a pivotal role in our healthcare industry and our nursing homes, and when the TPA was going to be reversed a few years ago, there was a level of panic in the nursing home community, because that's a huge piece of the workforce, skilled, dedicated workers who are Haitian, and they were going to be sent back. And I think we've all got a stake in this, and it's really important to all work together. My particular interest and I know Eloisa is in my neighbourhood. One of my passions is really the whole importance of English language classes and support to get citizenship. And English language classes enable our immigrants to improve their job skills, improve their marketable job skills, to improve their earning capacity, and to be really productive, valuable members of our communities. So that's one particular nugget that I push for, is the English language classes. But it's a team effort. Other folks are focused on housing, etc. So I really appreciate all the great work you do. I wish we had more resources and more commitment from at the federal level to support our immigrants who are fleeing some really difficult situations in their countries. But thank you all for your work, and I'm sorry I can't stay longer to be part of the conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. I do want to elevate that during the budget and ARPA process, you elevated the need for us to invest more in English language learner classes. We were able to get support for that in our ARPA process. I pushed for us to support Citizenship Day that would help us ensure that more of our residents can become citizens. So it's the work that we are all collectively trying to do here on the council to really meet the needs of our immigrant and migrant communities, especially. Also, as the councillor said, we know that oftentimes when we are facing labor shortages throughout our economy, historically the way that we've met that is through immigration, through just immigration, through immigration that allows all of our residents to not have to work in the shadows, and to really be able to make a living wage in our economy. So I thank the councillor for highlighting that. I'm going to turn it over to Councillor Mejia for any questions for the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I had to step out, but I'm back here, and I had a team member listening in. I wanted to just thank you all for underscoring the importance of the cultural competency piece, because oftentimes when we think about services, we just want to put Band-Aids on bullet holes, right? And we're like, check off the boxes, but we have to move beyond that and be super intentional about making sure that we are communicating and connecting with people in ways that is reflective of their own culture and journey. One of the things that we have heard in our office is that we have folks who are right now living in church basements, entire families who are afraid and don't know how to navigate in the school enrollment process, who are asking now for support of like, how do they get an IEN number so that they can work? There's a lot in terms of capacity, and I think that it's opportunities like these hearings that not only help get things on the record, but you came here with very specific asks in terms of the things that the City Council needs to do to help support. So I'm here for all of that, and want you to know that you have my commitment in that work. I do have just one question in regards to the education piece in terms of enrollment. Is there anyone here who could talk a little bit about that, navigating that, and what have been some of the things that you have found to be the biggest challenge for families with school-age children who are trying to enroll in our Boston Public Schools?
Yes, for the family who have small children, the daycare is the hardest part. And for the toddler, that's a really hard part, because wherever they go in, there is a long waiting list, and sometimes they just reject them because they're not qualified. And as a newly immigrant, there is nothing to convince them, yes, they are qualified. But if there is something from your part could do to make it easy for them, that would be a great help.
Would you then recommend that as part of our early childhood efforts that we set aside a number of dedicated slots for families who are undocumented or who are recently arriving who need support? Would that be helpful?
That would be a part, yes.
Yeah, dedicated, okay. Okay, great. And then in regards to thank you for that. In regards to the workforce development piece, I'm curious if you can, I know it takes a year. I heard it takes sometimes a year to apply. Meaning, you were mentioning?
I mentioned for asylum claims, a newly arriving immigrant has a year to apply for asylum. So, if it's not done within that period of time, they might lose that form of relief. So obviously it's important that families connect with attorneys so that they can begin that process. And obviously also with work authorization and work permits. Other people can speak to that as well, I believe.
I'm sorry, sorry to interrupt, I just want to repeat, because I told you all to remind me to repeat this several times during the hearing, but it's important for those who are in need of language assistance, since we have interpreters here in the chambers for anyone in need of translation. We have Spanish. Spanish is Maria Bastardo, and Spanish is also on Channel 1. We have Portuguese, Roseanne Rose, and Portuguese is on Channel 2. And we have Haitian Creole, Marie Louidor, and that's here on Channel 3. Sorry. Proceed. Yes.
Yeah, I was going just to add regarding the enrollment for children. As you know, those families have a long trajectory, year or two. So talking about the children have not been in school, and BPS definitely needs a lot of help in recognizing the gaps from those families, making sure that they help them set their footing straight by having specialists to understand the culture. Because those people, they've been in Central American countries, they've been in Brazil, they speak Portuguese, they speak Spanish, so you just don't know exactly which language they speak, so we need to expect to understand that for proper assessment of those children to allow them. That's number one. Just number two, also regarding medical, also, those children have not seen any medical professional maybe for a year or two. So they need definitely just proper access to medical care, so that I think connection can be made with the community health centers to understand the needs of those children, to allow them to get the proper vaccinations, the proper care, so that they can enroll in those public schools. So, and then regarding the employment readiness situation for those migrants, let me give you an example. Last time I had a meeting with the we had a meeting with USCIS with almost 50 different stakeholders. I brought close to 60 notices for TPS applicants who had applied since August 2021. So that's about 12, 13 months, never received that. So we're talking about many immigrants have been paroled last year. They had applied. The parole's now on the brink of being expired. Now they are issued requests for reparole. And USCIS will not do that, or ICE will not reparole those families. So those families who arrive, they are granted humanitarian parole. So we apply also for work permits for them. But God knows when they'll be able to have access to work permits. That would definitely alleviate the burden of the city, basically in terms of public benefits, if they can help those people find a fast track to employment within 3 months. That's what they will need. 3 months, they could help them get transitional housing and get them to work within 3 months.
You have the solutions. I hope everyone who's listening in just takes note here. Pastor Kiki just gave us the recipe for success, and I think that what this moment calls for is more urgency. I don't think we should be waiting for the next budget cycle to, start pushing on some of these things, and I think this helps inform the conversation, but I think that there are, when I see the early childhood education space, we secured over $1 million to help support workers. So I think that there's some conversations that we could be having now to help support. So thank you for what you brought to the space, and I'm taking notes.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that neither Eloisa or Dr. Gabo had something that they wanted to add here, because I think we had to mute.
Yes, thank you. I do want to make a comment about school registration, because I think Boston Public School overall has done a good job, registering the recent families that are coming, but I think that we need to have pop-up registration offices in the neighborhood.
Yep.
Before the pandemic, we had one here at BWG once a month, and was great because the families from all Bright could come and register right here. Of course, that was stopped because of coronavirus. And then afterward, we have been talking to Boston Public School. I think they have an interest, but maybe, everybody is suffering with the tightness of the job market. But I think that's something that has to be looked at. I don't know the situation of Jackson Man right now, because also that had been a registration pop-up for many years ago. Anyways, I think that regarding language access, we need to have more diverse people working. And I know Boston Public School has, but I don't know if they have any Brazilians doing registration. I don't know. I work with people who speak Portuguese, but they are not Brazilian. And unfortunately, it makes a difference, how you came here. You got to understand that experience. And also legal access. Moya has immigration clinics, which I think is great, but I also don't know the diversity of the attorneys. And because sometimes when I send people there, they don't want to go because they say they all speak English. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel confident. And I think that makes a difference. If you provide lawyers that come from the same country and can understand, it's not the language only, but understand, you don't have to explain yourself, because I came from the same place you came, and makes conversation much easier and create the trust right away. And this is so important when we work with immigrant communities. Thank you for the opportunity again.
Thank you, Eloisa. I appreciate your contributions, and I definitely think that we need to be increasing the registration opportunities for our young folks. Boston Public School has created the SLIFE program, which is for students with limited or interrupted formal education, which, a lot of you have talked about how we're talking about families that have often walked and bused thousands and thousands of miles over months period of time with young kids, that they have crossed rivers with and have really, crossed dangerous and treacherous routes. They come here and their education has been extremely limited. I was at a school in Mattapan once, and one of the SLIFE classrooms had the majority of students coming from Alston, Brighton, who were originally from Brazil, but there is no capacity or SLIFE classrooms in Alston Brighton for us to meet their needs. So we have them traveling more than an hour every day to Mattapan in order for them to get the educational resources. And I know that there's work being done to build out SLIFE capacity in BPS, and that's something that we also need to champion during the budget process to make sure that we are wrapping these our young students who are dealing with trauma and who have made these treacherous journeys with the tools that they need to be able to continue on the path of receiving an education. So I appreciate everyone for lifting that up. I'm just going to ask 2 questions because we have 2 more panels and I want to respect everyone's time. The first question is about one of scale. If you briefly could talk about, in this increase of migrants that we've seen in the past years, how has your organization, whether it be a grassroots organization, a community-based organization, a legal nonprofit, advocacy organization, or church, how have you scaled internally to build your capacity as an organization to meet the needs? Like, have you hired additional workers? What departments have you hired them in? Where have you found it to be most useful to add and build that capacity? I am all for, and I think Dr. Gabo spoke to this, we need to be following and listening to our nonprofits that are really leading the way, especially our nonprofits that are being run by those, talk about cultural competency, who are from the same immigrant group that folks are arriving from. So that means supporting Black and Brown-led organizations that are on the ground every day doing the work, which is why I'm glad we have Centro Presente here. I'm glad we have Mutual Aid Eastie. We have Asian American Resource Workshop. We have IFSI here, all to talk about what it looks like to be doing this work every day on the ground. So if you could talk a little bit about what scale has looked like and how you have done your own capacity building, that would be helpful.
Yes. In terms of really building the capacity, I know for a fact that we do need the resources. Like, we try to start an ESL class to give him the capacity of communicate, navigate the new country there. But if we were returned, either we seeking volunteer, which is not easy, and because of finance, to pay someone to come to teach 2 or 3 people, that's a problem. And even when we start with volunteers, and they not last long because the person needs some income in order to teach. And because they have a long waiting list everywhere for the English classes. But if they could have somehow to help in the churches, the community centers, to open more doors, to educate these people, that would be ideal.
Thank you, Pastor Omisil.
Dr.
Gabo?
Yeah, quickly, I just wanted to quickly go back for 2 seconds about the need for our children. I just want to make sure that everyone understands, especially with the new wave of immigrant families coming our way, especially for us. One of the characteristics of the families coming to us is like mostly pregnant women with children. So as someone who is always thinking about the future, so this is one of the greatest opportunities that we have to invest in those children who are really coming to us as infants, as babies, for us to really develop, the infrastructure to, accompany those students so that they can do well. So I'm thinking quickly about, extended hours, whether or not before, after school programming, and whether or not there is weekly vacation, any opportunity for us to really get those children the support that they need so that they can really have a strong foundation to become the leaders of tomorrow. So as we are talking about budget line item, helping those pregnant women, helping those new families, with new children have access to daycare when they can go to work, and then they know that it's not just having a child sitting in front of a television, but having the child with people who are equipped to really help them. I think that would be something that we should definitely invest in, because in the next 5 years, those children are going to be, 10 years old, 12 and 15. They will be ready for school, for middle school, for high school, and later on for college. So I think that's a great investment. So in terms of building capacity, we at IFC, we have basically, revolutionize the way that we welcome, immigrants by our dynamic and creative approach with working together with others. So we have done so much in the past 2 years that basically, we can write a book about, how we've been able to expand services, not only from TPS, when TPS Haiti was redesignated to really help TPS applicants fill out their paperwork and do all of the everything that they needed to switch to the new migrants, the new immigrants, where we have developed like a full array of intake to understand their needs, then to provide them, with what we call the one-stop service center. And one of the biggest challenges that we know that we have with immigrants is when they come, and then we have to send them to this office for myself, that office for DTA, that office. So by the time you are sending them to all the other offices, they get lost and they don't want to go. So that's one of the reasons why IFC has really developed what we call a one-stop service center. So by the time that the family comes to our door, there is an intake that is done. There is a conversation with a case coordinator. And before we know it, they go through all of the other departments to have access to everything that they need one day, one stop. And I think that's one of the models that we want to develop with other, immigrant organizations, to really help them to develop those, one-stop service model, because that's the best way for us to serve immigrants. So from, only doing academic work, so we have basically gone to really include everything around integration services like no one else has done, in terms of, for a community-based organization like us. So that's one of the reasons why I said building infrastructure is so key, because if we were not building infrastructure over the past few years, there is no way that we would have been in this position right now to not only have offices in Boston, but also throughout the state. We have offices in Everett, in Brockton, in Worcester, and now in Methuen. All of that is because, some infrastructure work has been done. And that's what I'm pushing, all of you to be thinking about. How do we best position the organization so that they can do the work better? Because the more you invest in this organization, the less headache that you have, because we will be equipped to do the work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Dr. Gavin. I appreciate that response. I wanted to ask one question about how we can. We obviously need to have a process that is lawyer dependent, and too many of our families, we haven't been investing in providing lawyers for migrant families, for low income folks. So I'm wondering, there are ways that we can involve non-lawyers in this process, and I was wondering if you have any thoughts about how we can potentially build capacity for non-lawyers to do some of the work that we know, traditionally lawyers do in the process.
Sure, Counselor. I think that, partnership is really important in this step, right? I can say from the Martha's Vineyard situation, one thing that I really saw was how the legal community really came and helped out in that situation. And I think it just really showed that, there is a will, right, to help. People are interested in helping newly arriving immigrants. So just, I guess, making connections with different community organizations that are obviously already working with immigrants as they arrive. Some of our paralegals were able to conduct some of the intakes when we were at Martha's Vineyard, and I'm sure that can be replicated in other scenarios, so that our community partners could help with that process.
Madam Chairman, can I also add the fact that Mira has been instrumental in helping train and more accredited representative. That's something that can be done, but the hurdles still lie with the Department of Justice, basically to process those requests for accredited representative, and I think that Mira is very instrumental in planning those trainings, 40-hour training, so that all the people basically definitely have all the professional capacity, but be able to interpret those forms. But they need that title, which is accredited representatives, and that we need that. And second, also, I believe that Maria is organizing clinics, but clinics, it's only just sharing information, understand the case, but we need definitely to develop some kind of network so that we can have other pro bono lawyers to help those migrants, because we have so many families who are in need of legal representation.
Thank you. And Liz, I don't know if you wanted to add any more about the accredited representative program that you've been running, or I want everyone to know that we recognize that this is a multi-level government response, and we did invite representatives from the state, from the Department of Housing and Community Development, who will be sending testimony. We recognize that we want them to lean in a lot more, and I know that Mira has been doing a lot of advocacy, so if you want to speak to the advocacy that you've been doing on the state level on this accredited representative program, and then we'll unfortunately have to wrap up. We'll have to wrap up this hearing. I'd like to recognize my city councilor colleague from the district, from District 7, Tanya Fernandez-Anderson, who's here, but if you wanted to answer the question.
Thank you. I have very little to add to the comments that have been made. Just to emphasize again that we do absolutely believe that the coordination between state, city, and all the nonprofit providers, particularly the community-based organizations, is absolutely critical to meet all of these needs, and Mira will be continuing to advocate for that at all levels. In terms of the accredited representation, while absolutely we want to see expanded legal services, it is so important to recognize that, especially for individuals who are in court proceedings and others.
And I'm sorry, I don't think we've done a good job, and I just want to make sure that everyone understands. So can you explain what it is? I think Pastor Kiki gave a brief summary, but if you could explain so that everyone understands what that is.
Yes, and so in immigration court, there is an option by which individuals who are not attorneys, who have not graduated from law school, can actually be trained and then be accredited by the Department of Justice in order to then represent individuals in immigration proceedings. And so Mira has for many years trained individuals. They must be associated with a nonprofit organization and providing services to low-income immigrants. But then they can be accredited, and therefore it's a terrific mechanism for expanding the availability of legal services in the immigration space. And so that is a great opportunity, particularly because immigration legal proceedings are so complex, and we do have the risk, unfortunately, of certain kinds of fraud that have happened in the immigrant community, where individuals who do not have that training have sometimes even with good intentions, negatively impacted cases. So we definitely lift up that program as a terrific opportunity and a space where more investment could be made to expand legal services for immigrants. And then also cautioning that we need to be sure that individuals understand, that new immigrants understand who can appropriately give them services. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz, and I just want to thank everyone on this exceptional panel for your expertise, for meeting the needs of our migrant and immigrant communities. I'm going to say that we know that we have a lot of work to do, and we don't allocate enough resources here. We are also dealing with the transition of a state government, and so we need to make sure that we set up this next administration up for success with identifying what the shortcomings are and seeing how we can fill those gaps. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to just continue in conversation to make sure that we can do what I can do here at local government, which is how are we allocating the resources that we have in our time and energy to making sure that our neighbors who come in and are sleeping in our churches, who are finding their, sleeping on the floors of our hospitals, that we are meeting people who are seeking refuge and who are fleeing persecution, and that we are saying that Boston is a place that will welcome them. So thank you for doing the impossible every day. And I know that me and my colleagues on the City Council will continue to work with all of you as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am now going to call up the administration. We have the Director of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, Monique Tu Nguyen, and we have the Deputy Director of Housing Stability, Danielle Johnson. As they come forward, I am just going to repeat that we have translation services available for anyone who needs them. Just let me find here. That we have Spanish, Maria Bastardo, Portuguese, Razan Rose, and Haitian Creole, Maria Luidor. Spanish is on channel 1, Portuguese channel 2, and Haitian Creole is on channel 3. Thank you for being with us here today, Monique and Danielle. I'm just going to turn it over to you for any remarks that you want to share with us and talk about the work that you've been doing. It'd be great if we can stick to 5 minutes and then we can go into more detail. If you need more than 5, though, it's fine. Don't worry. I'm not going to. I'm not going to. Yeah.
Pull the plug on me.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you, counselors, for showing that Boston is a welcoming city. A city committed to treating people with dignity, and thank you for allowing myself and Deputy Director Johnson here to speak with you today. Over the past 2 years, especially over the past few months, there has been an increase of new migrants in the United States and here in Boston. Many are fleeing an unimaginable violence. Our country on all levels share the challenge and responsibility to address the humanitarian crisis deepened by the pandemic. Mayor Wu and our administration support the right of people to seek asylum and safety, and the city and our communities are welcoming them to the best of our abilities. We'd like to thank our City Hall co-workers across several departments for their dedication and coordination. We'd also like to thank our nonprofits and hospitals for their tireless frontline efforts and the state for stepping up, and for you, counselors, for your attention and advocacy. In our testimony today, I'd like to begin by providing an overview of the current situation, recognize what the city and our communities are doing, and address critical gaps. And Deputy Director Johnson will speak on housing needs and provide clarity on the city's role in partnership with the state and federal government. The biggest questions that we get here, and you mentioned it before, is about the numbers and the scale. And that is our biggest challenge right now, is getting good data. Because unlike the other cities that we've been seeing across the country targeted by buses and planes, Boston is seeing our new arrivals, new migrant arrivals, show up in different ways throughout the city in smaller ways. But it's still notable and important for us to scale. And we're not experiencing buses and planes, so we are seeing them in emergency departments and medical centers, in transit stations, in nonprofit organizations, and just folks who are showing up and just walking up to neighbors and people, everyday neighbors, helping them out. And without this data, it's hard to predict who to provide for and for the scale of that response. And I would like to note also, Title 42, a federal policy that has kept people seeking asylum out of the United States because of COVID, is going to lift on December 21st. And when this does, we could see more people coming to Boston. So our strategy right now is to expand and scale up existing infrastructure to make sure our resources are inclusive to existing immigrant communities and new migrants. And for months, several departments and agencies across the city are hard at work allocating, expanding, and mobilizing resources and services. These departments include my own, the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement, the Mayor's Office for Housing and Housing Stability, the Mayor's Office for Neighborhood Services, the Mayor's Office for Food Justice, the Mayor's Office for Emergency Management, and the Cabinet for Worker Empowerment. I'm so glad that the panel was bringing up the worker component, because that's something that's so critical for this population and our existing communities. The Boston Public Health Commission and the Boston EMS, Intergovernmental Relations Team, the Administration and Finance Team, the Mayor's Office Executive Policy and Comms Team, as well as the Boston Public Schools and the Office for Early Childhood. Right now, a core team of city workers across departments is meeting every other day to stay up to date on what's going on, and we have a larger weekly meeting for strategic planning. We have also done a lot of work around emergency preparedness. Following the unexpected plane of migrants in Martha's Vineyard in September of this year, OEMs developed a standard operating procedure in case similar situations in Boston happened. And now I'll pass it over to my colleague from the Office of Housing Stability to speak more about the housing component.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. there we go. Thank you, Monique, and thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us to take time to be here today. Starting off, I just want to give a high-level overview for you, Madam Chair, and also those who are here as what the needs are or what the needs have been. And one of the biggest and most immediate need is obviously housing. And to provide an overview and a point of clarification, so the city, through the Boston Public Health Commission, is responsible for the individual adult-based shelter system, while the state controls the family-based shelter system, including families in Boston. That means if it's a family, the state is better positioned to support them, and the city is best positioned to serve individual adults who may need shelter. In the past months, the largest number of arrivals have been families. Thanks in part to the advocacy of Mayor Wu, the councilors' advocacy, the chair of this committee's advocacy, and our community leaders, the state has stepped up. They are starting to add capacity to their family-based shelter system and are looking for more options. The state legislature has also allotted $20 million in the supplemental budget to support immigrants and refugees. Governor Baker also recently filed an additional $139 million supplemental budget to address increased demand on emergency shelter systems and provide relevant supportive services to migrants, as well as establish an intake center in Devens, Massachusetts. And we hope the legislature advances this and welcomes all advocacy towards that end. In terms of what the city has been doing currently, if new migrants in Boston are individuals and not families, the city of Boston is working to take care of them. Boston Public Health Commission, BPHC, and our individual adult shelters have sheltered 48 migrants since September. I'd obviously like to recognize my division, but also the Office of Neighborhood Services for everything that they've been doing, because every day we've been placing migrant families unable to be served by the state family shelter and working with community-based organizations that Monique just mentioned, putting them in hotels or other temporary sheltering options until they receive the state's more permanent support. We are also working with the Boston Medical Center, Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Family Aid. Appreciate their president, Larry Siemens, being here today. And they've been very influential in connecting families with temporary shelter options. And then we also have the $1.1 million that you advocated for, Madam Chair, and we are using those ARPA funds to help with homelessness and eviction prevention. And I'll turn it back over to Monique to talk about the community work that we've been doing.
Thank you, Deputy Director Johnson. I'd like to reiterate that this is an unprecedented challenge that we are facing together, and we need everyone's coordination at all levels. And I'm so proud and excited to be able to be in this position to work very closely with the community, because as Dr. Gabo and everyone says, that they are and we are with them, the front line of the work. We're already seeing this in our communities, and the outpouring has been critical, and there's been comprehensive support from hospitals, community organizations, and neighbors. I want to highlight some of the regional organizations we've been in coordination and talking with. The Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative, most notably Centro Presente, Brazilian Worker Center, Immigrant Family Services Institute, Rion Immigrant Center, Agencia Alpha, and La Colaborativa in Chelsea, Clearing Brook and Deer Run Farm, English for New Bostonians, Boston Immigrant Justice Accompaniment Network, Amira, Boston Medical Center, East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Family Aid, and other organizations I don't have time to name today. This help includes food banks, meals, groceries, even getting around and navigating public transportation. And Boston is a real testament of taking care of others in their time of need. We hold monthly calls with community partners and advocates, so together we can assess the situation in the field and strategize best ways to support one another. This includes thinking of food distribution, legal aid, case management, and how businesses and communities can support. It's important right now to make sure our infrastructure adapts for scale and expansion, and this puts us in a good position to prepare us for the next and in the long term and short term. And I want to uplift that because of the advocacy of this council and administration from the previous fiscal year, I'm able to help foster and steward $1 million of investments that we're going to move into the field to meet this critical need in the beginning of the new year that will help with legal access expansion, mental health, outreach and organizing, and economic empowerment of immigrants existing and the new migrants that are coming through. As for what's next, we're working with the state to collaborate on new and ongoing ways to support migrants. We have bi-weekly calls with the state to advocate for the needs of our city, including to make sure that state's family-based shelter system and the city's individual shelter systems do not get pushed to capacity, especially as we enter winter. Supporting the Boston Medical Center's emergency department and making sure community organizations like IFC are uplifted, supported, and able to expand their efforts. As we advocate for the state to expand critical resources, provide clear and accessible information in several languages, and engage with support community-based organizations and leaders, we thank them for their continued collaboration. In addition, we need the federal government to better address ongoing needs, especially issuing employment authorizations in a timely manner for all eligible applicants. People want to and need to work, and the federal government needs to increase their capacity to release work permits and allow new migrants their desire to contribute to our economy. We also want the federal agencies at the border to work together to return documents, personal effects, medicine, and medical supplies to migrants. Without these documents, it's slowing down the process for applying for asylum and making people more vulnerable to exploitation, trafficking, and medical emergencies. Congress also needs to support services to the state and cities across the community and making sure it's a centered approach. The mayor and Moya have been working with other cities and towns across the U.S. to advocate for these needs. Councilors, Boston is ready to help. Our communities are strong and welcoming, and we've witnessed it firsthand. And it's clear there's more to be done, but thank you all for allowing us to speak today. To show that by working with the state and federal governments and communities, that we do our part in addressing this humanitarian crisis. We look forward to working with everyone to take care of our communities and continuing Boston's proud tradition of welcoming those seeking safety.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, and I think as you've heard from a lot of our community-based organizations about how Moya has really been there to help them stand in the gap to meet the needs of our different migrant and immigrant communities. So I'm going to just ask a few questions and try to be sensitive to everyone's time. I asked the last panel nonprofits about capacity building internally to meet the need. One, if you could tell us, like, what budget are you operating with at Moya, and how, like, in what areas do you think that we could scale up internally to help meet and further fill that gap to address the needs that our migrant communities have?
As Danielle was Deputy Director Johnson's naming, we have the housing funds, the $1.1 million, and that's going to be dedicated to the housing component to the needs there. And we also have a little bit more than $1 million around these other needs around legal access. It's around $600,000 that we're strategizing how to best use that and get that into the field, namely around the BIA accreditation, but we're exploring other creative ways to meet at the scale that's needed. And we have money around about $100K around workforce development, economic development. Those are examples.
Thank you. And several people have mentioned the Immigrant Legal Defense Network. Can you talk about the status of that, what we're doing, whether we are lifting that up as a resource, or is it time? Someone from the last panel stated that Martha's Vineyard displayed that there are lawyers who are willing to help if we are putting out a clarion call that was potentially a lot clearer during the Trump administration, where it was just openly xenophobic and racist. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity now for us to really re-examine and really build that program up.
Yes, during this time, we're doing a lot of field assessments, especially at this time of the year. A lot of organizations are assessing their capacity and their needs, and we're in ongoing conversations through this month and the first quarter of next year to align, especially to make sure that the funds that we use are effective and working with the field. So definitely we're aiming to make sure that we maximize the use of volunteers and people who are skilled and ready to go.
And someone else mentioned the legal workshops that we have, I believe, every other Wednesday in the afternoon. And someone uplifted that a potential critique is, number one, cultural sensitivity, but the fact that, and additionally, that people need ongoing support. Oftentimes attending once and you have these complicated asylum cases presents a lot of difficulty, and it may discourage people from attending. And so I'm wondering if we're given thought also to how these workshops that we offer can be more sustainable for folks who are in need of legal services.
Yes, we're going to definitely follow up with the organizations to learn more how we can be more refined in our approach. The consultations that we do offer, I do recognize that they are limited because they're just initial consultations, especially for asylum seekers. Cases are very complicated, and as we all know, there's not enough immigration attorneys. So thinking about a field strategy that supports more people that could do legal representation, but also people that are pretty much like caseworkers and paralegals to front load a lot of that is what we're looking at right now. So definitely going to think about ways that we can meet the scale.
Awesome. And I just want to also shout out, you all held legal workshops that were, targeted to Portuguese speakers, to Spanish speakers, and to Creole speakers. And I attended the one that was for Creole speakers, and it was actually really great to witness the intentionality with recruitment around lawyers who could speak the language, around that advanced thinking about how are we meeting the needs, and I believe from that clinic there were more sustained relationships. So I know that we are thinking about it, and part of what we need to do is how do we create more sustainable models, and that's part of what we are here for as City Council, to think about your budget and to think about what we can do to further support. I'm just going to turn it over to a question for Director Johnson regarding what are the plans right now. I know a lot of it is on the state level, but what are the plans right now that we have to further meet the housing needs of our migrant communities? In addition to the 1.1 million, in addition to, yeah.
Sure. So I think it's important to talk about the work that we have been doing since these migrant communities have been coming into Boston, and they've definitely been coming into the city of Boston from different avenues. So as Councilor Coletta had mentioned, East Boston is a heavy point of contact, working with Office of Neighborhood Services through our 311 to connect families. And then, of course, Moya has been very influential in connecting families to our services as well. And also Boston Medical Center and Family Aid Boston, making sure that if families are coming to Boston Medical Center for shelter, that Family Aid Boston is either Family Aid Boston or another partner organization that we work with, such as Neighborhood of Affordable Housing. Those families are able to move out of the ER into temporary housing until the state is able to build up more capacity for its EA shelter program. So currently, as it stands, we have been housing families temporarily, making sure that they have all of the paperwork, having conversations with the state to make sure that there are no snags. Of course, there's always issues with paperwork, but we've been, like I said, collaboratively working, and thanks to Moya and Monique and her team, they've also been able to assist. But from the housing perspective, our main goal is to make sure that there is shelter in place for these families. That can be a span of 2 days, it can be a span of weeks. And again, appreciate Larry Siemens is here today from Family Aid Boston. Appreciate the work that he has been doing with Family Aid Boston that connects families from BMC to temporary shelter sites. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and I just also want to just put on the record for folks to know that Massachusetts is a right to shelter state, right. And so it is important. We have a mandate to meet the needs, and so given what I just said, are we able to meet the need? Are we meeting the need of everyone who comes to our door? And if not, where are the gaps?
So the gaps are housing. We don't have a lot of capacity, but we work with different organizations to find the capacity. Dr. Gabot was here earlier, and she has been making Herculean efforts in making sure that families are housed, albeit temporarily. So I think part of it has been joint efforts, whether that's through Office of Emergency Management, ONS, Moya, really leaning into our partners and leaning into our partner organizations to figure out what are the best housing options. So the gap is definitely housing, and the gap is shelter and access to shelter. But again, we are working hand in hand with the state to make sure that that capacity is handled.
Awesome, thank you. Well, my prayer is that we hold that hand, that state hand, a little tighter, so that we can really meet the needs of everyone who is coming. I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues if they have any questions. Councilor Mejia.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So thank you to the administration for being here. I have a few questions. And one is, I'm curious about, we worked with Centro Presente this past summer and traveled to Central America to learn about the journey that so many people, and I want to note for the record that people don't leave their countries because they want to, in the hopes of coming here for an American dream. They leave their countries because they have to. And there's a notion, right, and a belief that when people come here, that they're embraced and seen as a burden. And I just want to uplift that. If folks can stay in their countries and live and survive, and if we don't talk about the role that America plays and why there's so much need for migration to happen, I think I know that's not part of this conversation, but it's something that we need to acknowledge. So that when people come here, that we take responsibility for their journey here. So I'm curious, in my journey to Central America, I learned that it's not just language interpretation and translation. You check the box off because some, group speaks Spanish and you're done with it. But I learned that, there are some dialects that have 24 different languages, even in one country. So I'm curious about what are we doing to support language access for folks who don't speak Spanish. And there's an assumption just because you come from Guatemala or Honduras that you're going to speak Spanish, but that's not the case. So I'm curious about how you're building your capacity to help support those families that are coming here who don't speak Spanish or English.
Yes, I've actually was talking about this specifically with team members from LCA last week, Language Communications Access, and also with indigenous communities that are here in Boston that are immigrant and non-immigrant. And we're thinking about the same of how we can actually recruit more people who are bilingual in indigenous languages from Central America and other countries. Languages I've come across like Mayan Quiche and Quechua, for example. So that's going to be something that's a priority for Moya team.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I'm curious, we talk a lot about working in collaboration with organizations, and I see the Cooperativa here in the house and other groups who have work alongside advocates. Those who are on the ground have a depth, I would say, command of what is at stake and what needs to be done. And I'm curious about the role that the administration plays working in deep collaboration with organizations who are on the front lines, and how are you utilizing that intel to inform your advocacy? And I'm curious if there are any opportunities. When we had COVID, we utilized the relief fund. And, if we're really going to be making investments, I'm wondering how you're thinking about reallocating resources in ways that help support the organizations who are on the front lines to help address some of these issues. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I am. Particularly right now, we're going through strategic planning with our office, and I think for me it's really important for me to have refined solutions to things by working with the folks who know what exactly the issue is with the field, and actually having them be part of the strategic planning process themselves. So where they're not just side consultants or we talk to them only whenever we're doing the RFP process, but also as part of our main collaborators in coalitions. So we have multiple coalitions that we are connected with them, and I hope that can help us further refine the offerings that we have for resources to make sure that they're also best positioned and their capacities are ready to go to apply.
So to that point, what I have seen in the 2.5 years that I've been on this council is that usually the loudest voices, and there's certain groups that get who have a seat at the table. So I just want to make sure and just uplift that we need to be really mindful of like how we create space for everyone to help support your thinking, because what we don't want to do is replicate bad behavior, and just invite those who we think could tell us what we should be doing, and that you're doing a deep dive into community. Because I know that I was on a panel with Gladys a month or so ago, and even in that short period of time, I learned so much about the work that's happening. Yvonne Espinosa, who I went on the trip with, was talking about the response. And so I think that there's a lot, we're learning every day something new. Mm-hmm. So to be in constant community with those who are doing the work is going to be really important, so not a quarterly thing. And then the last thing that I wanted to ask about is your staffing capacity. If you could just tell us, how many people do you have on the team? What is the language diversity, and like what your capacity looks like, and where are some areas of growth for you all?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly because just looking at how diverse the immigrant community here is in Boston, and how we as a team grow to scale, but also how we also have to use the investments we have into the field to fill the gaps. So our staff is a size of 10 to cover the whole city, and there's no two people from the same country or speak the same language. If they do, it's because it's like adopted language. So there's Vietnamese, there's folks who speak Vietnamese, Somali, Mandarin, Cantonese. There's also Spanish. Those are the coverages right now. We have 2 positions open. If anyone if you're able to help us find great candidates, we're expanding capacity for looking for more folks.
You want to put what those jobs are on the record?
Yeah, on the record, we have a community outreach coordinator, and also have a constituent services manager position open.
Yeah, I think that's great. I also think that as you're thinking about your workforce, and then I have one more question for the housing person, and then I'll wrap up my time. Or at least I'm going to assume that I stepped out, so and that's all right. But that, yes, I do appreciate the hiring, the full-time positions, but I do think that there's an opportunity for you all to think outside the box in terms of what your staffing model looks like, right? So if we've been talking about hiring people who are coming to this country, if they've navigated the system, if you will, successfully, why not create more opportunities to provide them with some ways to have a income, right? So that you hire ambassadors who can help support the work, so that we're not, again, just tunnel visioning the way we do things. Hire 2 people where you could actually expand and build their capacity, and there's something creative to think about here, like an ambassadors program of sorts for consideration for folks who have recently arrived and have managed to navigate the system. And then I do have a question in terms of housing. we're always talking about the crunch that we're in, and I'm curious if the city, and I don't know if you would know this, but I want to put it out on the record and something for us to consider, and if it hasn't been done, it should. But there should be a complete audit of how many apartment units are empty, and who are they owned by, and what incentives are there, any opportunities for us to help fill those vacancies up to support the housing crunch. Is that something that has been thought of? I'm sure it's probably illegal, so I don't even know if we can do that, but I just think that we have to think about every single way to hold everyone accountable and create opportunities for people to help address this.
So we may be able to get that information, and I can connect with our other divisions. I'm from the Office of Housing Stability. I'm the director. Good to see you, Councilor Mejia. But that is information that we could potentially get, but I will check with our other divisions within the Mayor's Office of Housing for that.
And when you check, is it possible to also see if the second part of that is there are vacancies, can we utilize those vacancies in ways that will help support families who have recently arrived and need immediate shelter? Because as I mentioned in the first panel, I have families who are sleeping in church basements,
Right.
And we can't say it's a crisis and have empty apartments and not create opportunities for people to either sublet or whatever that creativity looks like. I just feel like we need to move beyond the conversation and really think about what we can do in the here and now to help address the urgency in which this moment requires us. That's it.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I'll also say that, part of that creativity is also looking at the buildings that we own on the city and state level, which probably we have more ability to do things with what's within our own purview rather than what's being privately held. Like, what do we have? What are our buildings and our institutions that we are underusing that can be used as places of shelter? So I do think that is an important thing for us to really highlight. I'm going to turn it to Councilor Fernandez Anderson if you have any questions for the panel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I do apologize. I have to leave to another thing right after my questioning. Hello, how are you? Directors and Chief. I wanted to first start my questions with, sorry, what's your name again?
Monique.
Monique. I can call you Monique?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Monique, I wonder if you can walk me through someone is in trouble, a migrant, and they contact your office. Walk me through the services and how that happens.
Yes, if they contact our office, it's usually meeting with our constituent services manager initially, and they'll just sit and assess what their needs are and do an intake and connect them based on what their needs are, whether it be housing, food, or whatnot. So they are like the navigators of that. And if it depends on if they email or if they come into our office, there's a different response, but they are the first in line that they'll see.
Okay, thank you. And so the intake, how do they know that the services are available?
Like finding out in the first place?
Yeah, like what is the office, what is Moya doing to engage community so that community isn't educated or organizations are educated to actually bring in participants or whatever you call them?
Yeah, so we have monthly webinars that are open and live streamed even, and mostly community-based organizations are attending that, and we welcome them to bring in their constituents to even listen and to have voice in that space. It's usually to provide information that's abreast of what they're curious or what needing at that time. So we cater each community webinar to what the surface need are. So we have one on driver's license, we had one around food access, we have one coming up around energy bills. So it depends on what immigrant communities are surfacing as a merchant need. And we have that open in general for the public every month, and we advertise that on our social media and our newsletter.
Okay, thank you. I guess, just in consideration to access, when you think about Black and brown disenfranchised communities, we talk a lot about access and them not actually being able to access these digital types of platforms, and then you're talking about a subcategory of disenfranchisement. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking that probably digital platforms can't be the only way, and so just thinking about encouraging the department to just think about other creative ways to get into the homes or into institutions to be able to reach out. According to Boston.gov, according to our site, the largest population of immigrants are Chinese, then Dominicans, then Haitians, then Jamaicans, then Indians, then Cape Verdeans, then Vietnamese, then El Salvadorians, then Colombians, then Brazilians. And so every time you have something available in translation, well, not translation, but interpretation of oral interpretation, I've noticed that you will have Cantonese Mandarin, or sometimes Somali, and Spanish for sure, and then sometimes Portuguese. But being that there are more Cape Verdeans than there are Portuguese speakers, And that's still to be determined, because I would know, because then you're going to talk about Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, right? Curaçao, you're talking Angola. There are many countries that speak Portuguese that come either from Africa or otherwise. And so I would say that Curaçao, Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde speaks all Cape Verdean Creole. And so I wonder then, how come Cape Verdean Creole is never at the top of the list? And there are over 60,000 Cape Verdeans in Boston alone. So I would ask for prioritization there. And then obviously Indian, they come with English, the majority, right? So I can understand that, not always, but majority. And then Jamaican also English, but it should be, the priority should be according to Mandarin Cantonese, Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Cape Verdean Creole, then Vietnamese, but definitely Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. So in consideration to your staffing, the question then is, then it sounds like you have a mandate that the next person you hire needs to speak Cape Verdean Creole and Haitian Creole, not Spanish, not Cantonese, not Mandarin, not any of the languages you already have. So good luck with that. Hopefully those are the people that you find. And then is there a hub or an effort to create a hub so that you can consolidate immigration services in a site somewhere? Does it live somewhere in your site, or anywhere in the community organizations that you can refer immigrants or families to?
Just to go back to the language component, because it's actually a challenge and also something that we have to be very even though that there's a data around the numbers, we do definitely have a mandate. And I realize even in our staff, there's only so much that we can do as individuals, and we actually need the people who are language competent to be the ones actually doing the frontline work. So that's why I'm thinking about community-based organizations to be the ones that we invest in to do that. In regards to
but your department is 70% Asian, and I've looked it up. And so I think we could probably talk about just diversifying it a little bit, and then also looking into the budget. Maybe you need more money. Mm-hmm. Maybe you need more Black people there, and you need more money to do that. And then maybe it's contractual. Maybe it's not just, as you were saying, not just in operating. I want to help you do that.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate that collaboration. I look forward to working together to be more scaled and responsive to what the community needs. And I just want to name in regards to the mandate of language communications accesses, and the team is working really hard to think through how they work across the city to make sure that they meet the threshold languages based on neighborhoods, so that there's no neighborhood where the majority is converting folks, and nothing that's offered by the city, there's no offering there. So making sure that all the events and materials are already, no matter what, if they pre-register or not, that Keep Reading Creole will not be left out in the neighborhoods where they're at. So I want to name that and uplift that. That's something that you can call on us to strategize to make sure that you don't see those inequities in the field.
Appreciate that. Then is there a hub of consolidated or some sort of ecosystem of immigration services?
There is an ecosystem that we help collaborate with in regards to the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative, and also there's a network that's working on legal access in general, and we work with foundations to invest in them. And right now they are working together to build a network with RIAN, with Centro Presente, Brazilian Worker Center, and it's like a large group that they're working across the city. So because basically the need is everyone has their own specialties that they want to support one another with. RIAN, for example, and Agencia Alpha, they are BIA accredited, and they want to help other organizations to be BIA accredited too, so they can expand caseworkers, kind of like paralegals in their organizations.
Can you remind me again, what's your operating budget?
For Moya, so about 3.5.
Thank you.
And that just includes our investments, and majority of that is our investments in the field with ARPA, and also with our field regrants.
Okay, so somehow operating mixed in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So thank you so much, Chief. And my questions are for the Housing Stability Director. How you doing, sis?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much, Monique. What's exactly the gap in terms of numbers? What is that? What does that look like? You got $1 million. I negotiated some money because I think I like Council Lujan, and she was like, my priority is housing stability. And we brought some money over to you. Tell me about that gap. What is that? What is it? What's going on with that? What is that?
Sure. I'm happy to provide an update. So we are in the final stages of issuing money to IFSI, Dr. Gabot and her organization, to assist in this is ARPA funding that I'm referring to assist the Haitian immigrant community. And we're currently working with other community organizers to see where the gaps are. Councilor Mejia earlier had asked the question as to who we were working with and having more frequent meetings as opposed to quarterly meetings. And one of the meetings that we do have frequently is a monthly meeting with different stakeholders in the community to figure out where those gaps are and to figure out, is this capacity that your particular organization could take on? So right now, in terms of what's going on with the funds, $330,000 are going to IFSI and hopefully will be dispersed in the coming weeks. Dr. Gabot signed the grant last Friday to be exact. So we're just working through our bureaucratic accounting and finance departments to finalize that. And then in terms of gaps in general, I was mentioning early that there is a need for more shelter space. Which is we're trying to work with or not trying, but we are working with the state to increase that capacity. The state has made a lot of efforts over the last few weeks and months to increase that capacity. So that's where we have seen the largest gaps. And we've been able to work with different organizations like NOAA Family Aid Boston to temporarily house families until we can transition them into EA shelter, which is the state sheltering system for families. So that has been the biggest gap that we've seen.
There's a program, and I'm not sure if it lives in your department, that if you have a child in BPS, even if you're undocumented, that there's some sort of voucher program that you qualify for. If it is in your department, how are we working with BPS to let families know? I was at a salon, believe it or not, and ran into a family. And she was telling me that no school, everyone that she had asked, no one had absolutely helped her, even family liaisons and BPS. So I'm wondering if people maybe don't know. And then I had to, I called Joel from BHA, and it's like, this is who you talk to, this is what you do, and connected her. But how can we do better in terms of families finding out that this exists?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of having those conversations. That's not housed in my division, in the Office of Housing Stability, but we do connect with BHA, Joel, and also are in frequent conversation with BPS. They know how to reach us, so we're happy to facilitate that conversation and see where the gaps are in terms of housing needs. So if it's a matter of someone just reaching out to me, if my division can't do it, we try to work with Moya or ONS or another division that may be able to assist, or one of our partner organizations that may have housing capacity to take on families temporarily.
Great. Well, thank you. That's all for my questions, Madam Chair. And again, I apologize, I have to run. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to, there are additional questions. I just want to uplift what everyone has said here in terms of, we are really thankful for the work that Moya has done. You have here the Chair of Ways and Means. We want to think about your budget and want to think about how we're scaling it to meet the need, both internally at Moya and helping our nonprofits really scale to meet the needs of our migrants who are coming from Central America, who are coming from Brazil, who are coming from Haiti. And so I thank you for being here and for listening to the panel of advocates that we had before. And so now I'm going to call up our last panel. Thank you for everyone for your patience. And I'm going to call up our next panel, which is Centro Presente, Patricia Montez, the Executive Director, Anna Alonso from the TPS Committee, Gladys Vega from La Colaborativa, Leo Olson, co-facilitator of Mutual Aid Eastie. And I believe we have someone here from Asadon who is going to be here. We can introduce you once you're down here. Thank you. Oh, you can come to the center. Oh, and Kevin, did I miss you? Kevin Lamb, I'm sorry. Kevin Lamb, co-executive director of the Asian American Resource Workshop.
And Julio Perez.
And Julio Perez, thank you for being here. Thank you, and I'm just going to repeat that we have translation here, interpreters available. We have Spanish, Maria Bastardo, Portuguese, Roseanne Rose, Haitian Creole, Marie Luidor. Spanish is channel 1, Portuguese is channel 2, and Haitian Creole is channel 3. Thank you everyone for being here. I know that the hour is late, it is 4:16, but I'm just going to ask that everyone, organization, we're gonna go 5 minutes for each organization. So if we can find a way of splitting that, that would be great. So we're gonna start with Centro Presente.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes. Thank you, Councilor Lujan, for organizing this hearing and for having all of us here this afternoon. My name is Patricia Montes. I am an immigrant from Honduras, Central America, and I have been living in Boston for the past 18 years. I am the director of Centro Presente. That is an organization that for more than 40 years has been working with the Central American immigrant community, which first came to Boston as the result of the civil conflicts in Central America in the 1980s. This was an armed conflict that was supported by the US government and that left more than 200,000 people killed by the military in Guatemala, most of them indigenous. And more than 75,000 people lost their lives in the civil war in El Salvador. The legacy of these conflicts and interventions is reflected in the fact that Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador has become the most violent and dangerous countries in the Latin American region. For us at Centro Presente, it is urgent to respond to the mass incarceration, racism, and systemic discrimination that immigrants face. But it's also urgent to understand the forces that push them to leave their countries of origin without the proper documentation and come to cities like Boston. They don't come because they want to die in the desert, leave their children, or because they like the cold weather in Boston. It is a life or death decision to leave their countries. Central Americans are not economic migrants. Please do not say that people from Central America are coming for a better life in the United States, because they come because violence is forcing them to come. They flee from extreme situations of poverty, multiple manifestations of violence, due to the endemic levels of inequity, environmental degradation, and dysfunctional political systems that are marked by high levels of corruption and impunity. According to official data, most of the people that are coming right now to the US and Mexican border are from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And I'm pleased to see here the Haitian community because they are also coming by thousands. Since 2004, Centro Presente has organized annual delegations to Central America to educate our local elected officials to better understand what forces migrants to flee. Migrants are not migrating. People are not migrating. They are fleeing violence. And I want to take the opportunity, it's too bad that she left already, to extend my gratitude to City Council Julia Mejia, who traveled with us this past summer to Guatemala and Honduras to understand the situation over there. In this context of massive arrivals of immigrants seeking international protection and asylum, women and the structural reasons that force them to migrate are invisible. At Centro Presente, we receive at least 10 women with their children every week. And the media is talking about the crisis about the border and the crisis in our communities. Well, I want to tell you that for us, this crisis is not new, because Central Americans usually are invisible within the conversation of immigration and immigrants in this country. Since 2014, during the crisis of the unaccompanied Central American minors arriving at the border, this has not stopped it. And I can see that a lot of people here can testify about that reality. Our communities have been invisible in the eyes of the media, some elected officials, and other sectors. But every time that there are elections, then they become very visible and used for political reasons. Since 2014, we as Centro Presente have been giving ourselves the task of building a women's rights center for Central American women and girls to be able to address their problems. Central American women and girls have been and continue to be invisible, such as the case of Allison, a 14 years old from El Salvador who lives in East Boston, who told me a few days ago, Patricia, my aunt was raped by a gang member in El Salvador, and a few days later, we found her dead. What about Claudia, another Salvadoran immigrant who is also living in East Boston and using fake names in order to protect their identity? She told me, Patricia, I came to the United States because there is a lot of violence in El Salvador. My children and I saw when a young man from a gang shot another person 25 times. What about Carolina, who is also living in East Boston? She told me, Patricia, I was raped by a gang member, and I was paying the extortion, and they told me, if you don't continue paying the extortion, we're going to rape your daughter, who was 9 years old at that time. These women are fleeing, these women and their children are fleeing from countries that are horrible, with beautiful people but horrible governments. In a recent report by the UN, in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, every 25 hours, a woman is being killed, assassinated in a violent way. At Centro Presente, we're working with these women to deal with untreated multi-generational trauma and gender-based violence. But there are other factors that are exacerbating this reality, such as COVID, gentrification, and discrimination that these women receive in some institutions that generally do a good job but are incapable to recognize that they had to improve in the treatment they give to our communities. Like the case of the East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, for example, an institution incapable of recognizing that it has to improve in many aspects. In March of this year, 10 Central American women with the support of Centro Presente and Lawyer for Civil Rights filed a formal complaint to the Attorney General's office. All of them are women, Central American, undocumented, and with bad health. Some were misdiagnosed and discriminated against. In the most extreme case, the baby of an undocumented woman who lives in East Boston died to the negligence of this institution. And I ask myself all the time, why are undocumented women from Central America receiving this treatment? And I also ask myself every single year, every single day, why no elected officials join us on this campaign? Why they are not joining us on this campaign? In closing, I would like to identify as a critical need more resources for mental health, that you already discussed about that, more resources to treat multi-generational trauma with a gender lens, and also please establish a better system to monitor these institutions like hospitals, and this one that I already talked about, in particular in East Boston, to monitor them and understand if they are how they are treating our communities, because we deserve dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for sharing your truth and the truth of so many that you work with every day with us here on the City Council to let us know how we can do a better job of showing up and standing by you. I also just want to recommend, I think you referenced the report, but if folks have not had the chance to see Centro Presente's report, Fleeing, Not Migrating, Crisis in Central America, I really encourage everyone to read it because it lays out the truth about what Central American communities are facing and what we call the push factors, right? Folks want to stay in their countries but are being pushed out because of the level of gender-based violence, of trafficking, of all of these issues that they're facing. So I thank you for your work and I thank you for this report. I'm going to move on to TPS committee. Good to see you here. You both collectively have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, City Council. Thank you to everyone to have us here. We will try to address as much as we can in the time that we have a huge problem that are affecting so many communities. So my name is Ana Alonso. I'm a member and founder of the Massachusetts TPS committee. I have lived in East Boston since 2001, where my daughter grew up and attended public schools. I consider East Boston my home, and I always try to support my community. Also, I was part of the diplomatic service of El Salvador for 17 years, and I had the opportunity to serve and support the Salvadorian community and know about the TPS. In 2017, the Trump administration canceled the TPS program for some countries, starting with Haiti, and then was like the domino effect, one by other. Congress created this program in the Immigration Act in 1990. This program is an immigration relief for countries suffering disasters and ongoing armed conflict. According to the Center for American Progress, in 2017, it was 78,000 people in Massachusetts were TPS. This could be more in this years because there was another designation for brothers and sisters from Haiti last year. These are from El Salvador, Honduras, and Haiti. As a result of this cancellation, the TPS community and allies decided to fight to protect the TPS family from deportation by the most racist president in the history of the US. We all know that name. The TPS community used the National TPS Alliance to fight against the deportation process. What we do is we march in DC, we march outside the White House, and we have been marching for the past 5 years demanding for permanent residency. Well, we find out that we tried to stop this process when Donald Trump, in the case Ramos versus Mayorkas, now it's Ramos versus Nielsen, now it's Ramos versus Mayorkas, and 8 brave families decide to sue them on California. But this demand or this litigation will not going to give us legal permanent residency. What happened is the last designation that everybody celebrate. It's not because the president take the pen and say this country is going to get back the TPS. No, the 18 months is because the litigation is still on, and they will be protecting the country during the litigation until the process is done. So that means that in June 2024, if nothing is permanent, these people will be on the same process. They're going to be without status, and they're going to be in danger to be deported. That's going to affect the economy of this country, especially in Boston. We all know here that East Boston, where I live, so many people who are business owners are TPS recipients. Or members of the community in East Boston, I think it's one of the neighbors that has more TPS. I don't know, Patricia may know better that number than me. And we were asking that our community put the eyes of this program that has more than 21, these people have more than 21 years living in the US. They have families here, they have kids, they have a valid work card to work, and they're being part of this society for so long. To be on this program, there has to be, paying every 18 months, make a background check. So that means they were ruled all the with all the process. So why they're gonna call this temporal? After 21 years, nothing is temporal. So we encourage that everybody here support the TPS community as well as the DACA community because they're at the same limbo, and make sure that people in Washington listen. I have here with me Julio Perez, who has TPS, and I think is one of the most famous face of this campaign because he was fighting since day one. So I want to introduce Julio Perez, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Councilors. Good afternoon to you. My name is Julio Perez, TPS recipient, original from El Salvador. I have lived in Boston since 1994, and I have worked at Harvard University since 2012. As Anna said, I am one of the affected by the Trump administration's cancellation for all TPS recipients in 2017. As a member of the Massachusetts TPS Committee, which is part of the National TPS Alliance, as a volunteer activist, since 2017, I have participated in many activities nationwide. In 2018, a bus called La Libertad made a tour across the country for 90 days, and I drove her for 2 weeks. In 2019, we organized 500 people and mobilized them in 10 buses to participate in a massive march in Washington, D.C. I have visited the U.S. Congress many times to speak to congressmen and women advocating for a bill that provides the permanent residency for 400,000 TPS recipients in the country. In 2020, the National TPS Alliance defeated the pandemic by doing one more tour with the bus La Libertad across the country to encourage the voters to go out to vote against the hate, and I drove the bus for 2 months. As Congress is in negotiations to pass a bill that could provide the permanent residency for TPS and DACA, before the end of this year, I will travel to DC from December 14 to 16 to ask legislators to stress the moment by using any avenue that makes this bill become a federal immigration law on our behalf. Madam Chair, my petition to you today is to write a letter signed by all Boston City Councilors addressed to our Massachusetts delegation, congressmen and women that represent us in Washington, D.C., to support this negotiation by writing or calling the Hispanic Caucus and the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Also, Senator Kirsten Sinema from Arizona and Senator Thomas Tillis from North Carolina are in charge of this negotiation to make the last efforts before the new Congress take place in 2023. We only have 15 more days, and today, starting today, the National TPS Alliance is arriving to DC, is landing, and we are going to be there for 2 weeks visiting Congress, senators and Congress offices. Thank you for the invitation today, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Anna and Julia. And on that 2019 bus that you organized, my father was there, and we stood in collaboration and solidarity with all of our immigrant communities demanding for an extension of TPS. And I was so happy to be alongside each and every one of you. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And also, if folks notice, this conversation is, originally as FAD was about just our new arrivals, but we need to make sure that we are shining a light on the issues that all of our immigrant communities are facing, that aren't getting the resources, that aren't getting the support. And we need to really be shining a light on the organizations that are really run by us, by Black and brown folks. So I'm really happy for the diversity of the representation that we have here, so that we can learn as a city council how we better partner with all of you. Next up is Kevin Lamb, who is the co-executive director of Asian American Resource Workshop, who I think is going to bring a perspective of what it looks like when we don't support early on the needs of our communities, and how we end up really facing a deportation crisis if we're not doing the work on the front end. So Kevin, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, good evening. And thank you, Councilor Lujan, for inviting me and ARW to speak on this issue. My name is Kevin Lam, and I'm the co-executive director of the Asian American Resource Workshop, AARW. AARW is a community organization based in the neighborhood of Dorchester in Fields Corner and organizes with Asian communities across Greater Boston. While we organize on a multitude of issues related to the displacement we see impacting our people, I'm here today to talk about the impact of immigration issues on Asian communities. To talk about immigration issues impacting all immigrant communities, we really need to talk about and understand the history of migration to this country, sometimes by choice, but often forced due to the destabilization of people's home country. We need to talk about and understand this history so we learn to do better and not repeat the same mistakes from decades prior. The Southeast Asian community is the largest refugee population to be resettled to the United States. Boston served as one of the original refugee resettlement areas for Southeast Asian refugees, particularly Vietnamese refugees, to resettle in after the war in Southeast Asia. The neighborhood of Dorchester, particularly Fields Corner, is the heart of the Vietnamese community, where Vietnamese refugees and immigrants have created a sense of community and home with each other, and where they can go to access resources and services in language, but are facing displacement through gentrification and being forced out of the community and neighborhood. Statewide, Lo is home to the second largest Cambodian population in this country. And when we talk about the undocumented community in Massachusetts, 1/3 of the undocumented community here are Asian. However, when we talk about immigration issues and the broader immigration landscape, Asian refugees and immigrant communities are often left out of the conversation. Asian communities, our communities, are not a monolith. Our communities do not all speak the same language and have complex and nuanced lives, including nuanced experiences of immigration and migration to this country. At AARW, when we talk about immigration issues, we talk about it through a crimmigration lens, understanding the ways in which the criminal legal system and immigration systems are connected and that have funneled our community members from the prison to deportation pipeline. For the past 2 decades, Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Lao refugees who came here seeking safety, fleeing war and genocide, have been facing deportations to the countries in which they fled over 40 years ago. The lack of resources and services for refugee communities after resettlement played a huge role in the deportation crisis we are seeing in the community today. The way we talk about immigration needs to change. While immigration is often talked about as a federal issue, there are actions that can be taken at the city level. The narrative AARW is continuing to counter is the mainstream narrative within the immigration landscape about the quote-unquote good versus bad immigrant narrative, who's deserving, who isn't. There is stigma within immigrant communities and the broader public to talk about immigration and deportation issues as a result of criminal records. This needs to change both in narrative and action through how policy is drafted to not carve out refugee and immigrant communities who have convictions, to the needs for responsive services and resources to effectively care for refugees and immigrants. What we've known for a long time, but has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, is at a baseline, we need language access provided across agencies and institutions serving immigrant populations. During the pandemic, AARW and other Asian American community-based orgs came together to fill a gap to support Asian immigrant communities. Our people were facing barriers in filing for unemployment, housing assistance, and so much more. And a large part of this is because the languages available were not in any languages our community members could understand. We need data disaggregation for our communities to be able to break down the data that is collected not just by race but by ethnicity, so our organizations and other agencies can provide efficient and culturally responsive services and support for our people. We need free, low-cost legal assistance and services for the most marginalized within immigrant communities. For us, this includes immigrants facing deportation because of prior criminal records, because time and time again, we have worked with community members who have been told that there is no hope for them or their case, and that because it is not an asylum case, it can't be worked on. We need a pathway towards immigration relief for those with criminal records facing deportation. Because of our work with Southeast Asian communities impacted by deportation, We need alternatives to incarceration where the sentencing can have detrimental immigration consequences, where people are living in a state of limbo, not knowing if or when they might be deported. What we have in place currently is not working, and this needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We're now going to move on to La Colaborativa. I'm sorry, I don't have your names on, so just make sure that you say your names. See, Gladys is over there, but she's delegated you all to be the speakers, which is amazing when you leadership to allow and give room for others.
Yes. Good evening, Sister Councilwoman, and first of all, I congratulate and I honor the work that you guys do here in Boston. I am not Gladys Vega. My jefecita insisted on me talking today. My name is Norielisa de Jesus. I wear a few hats. I'm a counselor for District 3 in Chelsea, but I'm here with my organizing hat of over 16 years at La Colaborativa, working closely with Gladys Vega. So I want to talk a little bit about what we have been seeing in Chelsea. La Colaborativa is an organization located in Chelsea that is being flooded with newly arrived families from across the state. We have been receiving closely 80 to 120 families a month. I would say on a weekly basis, 15 to 20. And our community is already in so much pain, right? We're still recovering from the past few years. We're still dealing with the financial impacts from COVID with our current families in Chelsea, a small community of immigrants that usually is the reason why our organization is promoted at the border, in other states, at Logan Airport. When our families arrive to Massachusetts, they hear one way or another of the work of La Colaborativa. And although we are stretched thin, we are not the ones to turn our back on anyone walking in through the doors. Whatever it takes, we make it happen. And so through our clinics that we have been hosting on a monthly basis, in collaboration with Lawyers for Civil Rights, MIRA, MGH, our very own municipal, the City of Chelsea, we have been doing a one-stop shop for these families. So our families arrive, they receive health care enrollment, they receive school enrollment for their children. We begin to explore what is the opportunity for shelter or housing, working with GBLS and their shelter unit. I have not yet been able to place a family in a shelter, which brings back to the point that was made earlier with one of the panelists. Housing is a huge gap. What we have managed to do in order to make sure these families who come in are not sleeping in the street is there's been an outpour of neighbors and just community members who say, I have a living room and I don't want that child and that single parent to sleep in the street. I will lend them my living room. Which obviously is adding to the subleasing and overcrowding apartments that we have, but it is survival. It is the only way for this family not to sleep under a bridge in the street with their child. We have literally just last week, and Gladys and I were talking about this, we received pictures of community members seeking support for housing, and the pictures demonstrate a mattress underneath a kitchen table in a small little kitchenette. Obviously, at night, that is a bedroom, and then during the day, the mattress is put underneath the table, and they can use that space to cook for everyone who's living in the apartment. But that is how severe the housing crisis is and how big this gap for the need for shelter for our families are. We connect our families with ITIN clinics and employment opportunities. Again, survival. Make sure that whatever way that they do end up getting employment, that they are paying taxes, that they do understand whatever opportunities they have to begin a pathway to citizenship. And we are operating literally like an emergency room. La Colaborativa on a Friday afternoon is insane. We We spoke to our receptionist this morning, and it might not just be on a Friday. It could be at this point any day of the week. Before heading here in our Uber, she said that she had seen 10 newly arrived families just from the minute we opened the doors at 10 a.m. And I believe it was about 2 p.m., 2:30 when we were on our way here. And the way that they come in is with their luggages, trash bags or duffel bags, their children in their arms. Some have come in with flip-flops in the middle of a rainstorm in the chilly weather that we're seeing. Hungry to the point where they'll sit in a reception area, La Colaborativa, and 5 minutes or 10 minutes by the time that we get to the front, they are sleeping and just knocked out because they have not sat down. We receive them in our pantries, carrying their children and just seeking some type of support. They have no idea where they are, how to get around, how to navigate, right? And so in our clinics, we also make sure that we are able to take these families on a tour. This is where you go for an emergency with your health. This is where your child will be attending school. This is your local supermarket. Something as simple as that, we take very hands-on, and we do the step of actually going on a tour with them of our community. And you know, every week is a new heartbreaking story. So we definitely need to provide mental health for our families that are enduring all these horrible stories, but we also need to provide mental health for the agencies and the nonprofits that are seeing these stories. I tell you, the mom who we supported in one of our clinics about 6 months ago, 3 days after enrolling in health insurance, she needed a kidney replacement. And she was in tears, holding the pain at home, reaches out to us, and we're like, you can go to the hospital. We got your Mass Health and everything in order. Just let them know. And, you know, we navigated that. But something as simple as enrolling them immediately into health insurance could be life or death for these families. The wife being sexually assaulted by her husband and being threatened with ICE. The family fleeing a subleasing situation where the master tenant continues to push on taking care of their children, and the parents obviously are fearful of sexual abuse. The hundreds of families that are just dropped off at Logan Airport, and we have staff members or different social workers that just happen to be flying in or out of Logan Airport that day, and then they call La Colaborativa on a Sunday, on a Saturday, on a Friday, and they say, well, I have Jesus in the car, what do I do? And so that's what La Colaborativa has been doing, but again, we don't have the resources to keep this up. It's an emergency room, and we are putting bandages on bodies that need surgery. And so we are looking forward to working with Boston and our neighboring communities, continue to work with the leaders at the state level, MIRA, Lawyers for Civil Rights, but we have serious gaps in housing, and we have serious gaps in legal representation. For all the above cases that I mentioned, there is harassment, sexual harassment, abuse, and all these different things that our families are going through in our very own state that they could potentially work with attorneys to receive some type of immigration relief or some type of pathway towards that. So thank you again for this opportunity to speak, and again, it's an honor to be here with you all.
Thank you, Norielis. Thank you, City Councilor. But thank you, Norielis, for being here and for sharing. Next up, we have the folks from Mutual Aid Eastie. Hello for being here. Just in the interest of time, again, I just want to repeat, just trying to give 5 minutes to folks collectively. So however you want to divide that 5 minutes up, and then we'll close out with Asadon, and I'll be quick with my questions. Hopefully if Councilor Mee has any questions, we can be quick. And then I know there are folks who are here for public testimony. Thank you for your patience. We will get to you as soon as we can.
Great, thank you. So my name is Leonard Olson, or Leo. I use he, him pronouns. I'm one of the co-leads with Mutual Aid Eastie. We are a neighbor-to-neighbor support network in East Boston, and this is our first time here, so thank you so much, Councilwoman, for giving us the opportunity to speak. We're going to try to represent all the neighbors in our network as best as we can, not just the three of us. So our mission is to connect neighbors to neighbors by creating community spaces that build unity, trust, solidarity, and community care. We're super happy to be alongside these co-panelists today who've been building community for years in their respective networks, so it's an honor. And I'm going to pass it to my compañeras in a second here, but I also want to say that one of our coworkers, Hugo, could not be here today. He's really the person who's most been working with a lot of the families and connecting with the families who have recently arrived in East Boston over the last couple months. So a quick shout out to Hugo, and I'm going to pass it to Sai.
Hi, my name is Zayda from Mutual Aid in Boston. Thank you, Councilwoman, for the opportunity. Hi, Julia. And I guess everybody said what I was going to say. At first, I didn't know what Sanctuary City meant. And now being out there and seeing what's going on, all these programs, and thank you, Monique, and for all the stuff that you talked about, and thank you to the mayor, but I don't see it. So I don't know why people are falling through the cracks. We get like Carativa, we get people in mutual aid families, seeing a family in an ATM sleeping with a baby, and they thought that was a safe place for them. To me, it's beyond my belief. Not feeling like comfortable to go to the police, or not trusting the police to get them to La Carativa, to get them to mutual aid, to get them help. It's unheard of. How can we make those gaps go away? How can we help these families? So here at Mutual Aid, we're here to offer our support, to be part of this commitment, to make sure that this family have a safe and have dignity when they come to our country. And I hear a lot about shelters, but how do we go beyond shelter? What happens to these families when they leave the shelters? There's no housing. There's nothing. And I know the city has tons of property that is not used, abandoned property. How can we make those properties available to these families in our community? This is not going to go away, and I have a feeling that it's going to get worse. And we need to step in, and we thank you. Hope that we all collaborate as a community and involve every program in the communities to work with this issue. Make a team like FEMA, make an emergency team that deals with these immediate issues, and not just, like you said, put a Band-Aid and forget about the surgery and let them, rot in the street. These are families, these are children. They're entitled to come to this country and be safe and get an education, be free from their countries and the pain they're suffering. Thank you. I didn't read anything. It was from my heart. That's what this work is. It's from the heart. And so I appreciate you for everything that you do and for sharing that. And I'm sorry that this is the first time that you've been invited to Boston City Council because, but like you all are doing the work, which is why I'm sorry that this has been so long for everyone, but it is important for us to be centering your voices because you are every day on the front lines doing the work, and we have to figure out how we're better supporting you. So thank you.
And I just want to say something. I'm Daisy Gutierrez, by the way, and I co-facilitate the Mutual Aid Network as well. I just want to bring an invitation to everyone, including the departments that work here at City Hall, to work with the grassroots organizations, with community groups, right? Like, I think there is a big disconnect, not to be cliche, but, communication is key in relationships, right? And we know that with our personal relationships, and it doesn't change when it's a relationship here, right? Like me talking to you and you talking to me. Communication is key. So yeah, I just want to shift that culture of like OHS, like I need your help and can you help me? Because there's families coming in that need shelter. So yeah, hopefully we could work together in the near future and we can have a different conversation that we've been having now.
Thank you, Daisy, for your testimony and for your leadership. Communication is everything, and it shouldn't be so hard for our communities that are already sidelined and forgotten in so many ways to get what we need. I'm going to close it out with Acedon. If you could introduce yourself. Well, there's another community group that needs to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Council Mia. It's so good to see you. I'd like to thank my colleagues who have spoken to so many stories, migrant and immigrant stories. They are familiar to my ears, to my mind, and to my work. And as we go forward, You can see my sleeves are rolled up. This is what we all need to do. And I am grateful for the fact that this docket, I'm a very big numbers person, it is 11:48, meaning that at 12 o'clock on the dot, we need to be sustainable going forward. So I am calling to Madam Chair that we should have 12 action points from everything that has been said in this hearing. Going forward, we must not dial that clock back. It must be at 12. It is a new day for our families. It is a new day for Boston. It is a new day for everyone who came here seeking refuge, seeking peace, seeking sustainability. And I'm sorry, I just kept hearing all these stories and I wanted to cry, but at the same time I said, but I've heard this story so many times. Why am I hearing it again? Why am I hearing about people failing to find housing? As a CDC, ASEDON is a CDC, we've been doing this work for over 20 years, and our wave was during the Somali Civil War. And we have families were arriving and there wasn't enough cultural competency for them. And we have worked systematically over time to build an identity within Boston. And I'm proud of the Somali community. I'm proud of the Ethiopian community. I'm proud of the Sudanese community that we have come from far, but there's still more work to be done. And we should be looking at 12 o'clock and saying, 12 o'clock, we don't need to see more waves. We need to see welcoming. We need to see Boston ready always for our families. I will stop there because there's nothing more that needs to be said. There are no more stories to be told because at 12, we won't be hearing stories, right? We're just going to do the work that needs to get done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, for bringing that truth, for being here, making sure ASEDON's voice is at the table as we have these conversations. And so to your call to action that we have these action points, we've talked about housing, we've talked about what Boston needs to do, what other cities need to do to really be meeting the moment, and how we can fight as folks who come, as the benefit of representation is having folks from the community who can say, this is what we need and this is what we haven't been getting. And also, putting pressure on the state to really meet the moment with the resources that they have, to really provide shelter in these buildings and in these spaces that are owned by the city and owned by the state, that this is a humanitarian issue that requires all of us to lean in. So we've talked about housing, we've talked about education, and we've mentioned the trauma that our communities face. And a question that I have for each organization is, what, if any, capacity building have you done internally as an organization to help meet the trauma and the mental health issues that our communities, that migrant and immigrant communities are facing? Oftentimes, we are in the rush to meet the immediate basic needs of shelter and of food, that we oftentimes get these mental health, which are overall health issues, neglected, and sometimes the institutions aren't prepared to be culturally sensitive to the mental health issues that our communities face. So what capacity building are you doing, or do you want, or should we be doing to really address the trauma that our communities face?
Sorry, Madam Chair. I can speak to ASEDON's work in that front. We have a behavioral health program titled Jenga, just like the game, but it is a Kiswahili word that means to build. That behavioral health network uses peer-to-peer the same way they use neighbor to neighbor. You use peers who understand your lived experience and are able to speak to what you are enduring, but they're also able to facilitate solutions, because that's what the role of community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, CDCs, and the cities themselves, that's our role, to facilitate. But who gets to hear that story? Who gets to interpret it? The person who has a similar lived experience. And building that capacity and empowering CBOs, CDCs, and peers themselves who are creating those networks is very crucial going forward. Behavioral health, from an immigrant perspective, has a very steep perceived stigma. because we look at it from the extreme. Every time somebody has a behavioral health issue, it's usually the extreme depression, extreme bipolar disorder, extreme of everything. And even if you can see the hallmarks of somebody dealing with something, and you want to bring it to the forefront and say, hey, I think you're dealing with this issue, why don't you see someone? I'm not crazy. That's what you're going to get back. I'm not crazy. And you want to tell them, no, you're not. Just like you cut your hand, you put a plaster or a bandage on it. Right now, your brain just needs a bandage, and you need to see somebody about it, but that is going to take time. So in the meantime, empower and help CBOs build that capacity so that folks have the confidence to go into institutions, like you've said. And there's so many CBOs that I would like to give the spotlight to who have supported these efforts, like Boston Public Health Commission and Moya. They're right behind me, but I'm pointing to Monique right now. Moya and Healthcare for All. These are all advocates on the health front. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. I just want to say that one thing that I don't think we do well as a government and as a city is we are dealing with so much, and our communities are dealing with so much. We don't do a good job of hand-holding, and sometimes you got to hold people's hand. Sometimes you gotta hold people's hands so that they can get what they need so that they can be whole people. And so I appreciate that, Claire, and I appreciate all of the work that you all are doing to handhold. I think, Nodielis, you mentioned that the trauma that providers and people in these positions need, because every day we are trying to meet the needs of people. I was at the home of an immigrant family last night, late at night, that their child hasn't been receiving the educational resources they need, and it's our job to really, whether elected officials or CBOs, to really stand in that gap and do the handholding that is necessary for sometimes our folks who don't believe that they are worthy, but they are more than worthy. And our budget needs to reflect that our people are more than worthy of receiving these resources. So I don't know if there's anybody else who wanted to.
Boston and Chelsea is such a much harder process because we already feel disconnected from Boston. We sometimes feel we don't belong. And not only that, the trust issue, immigrants traveling to Boston.
Yeah.
So we have the disadvantage of all the programs that Boston has. So we try to mutual aid as much as we can to connect neighbors with neighbors, have meetings, build relationships, empower neighbors, give them resources, and walk them through because we're not a direct service. We walk them, we hold their hands and, hope for the best and hope that, there's a brighter tomorrow.
Can I just add real quickly to this? Because I was going to say something similar. In Chelsea, at La Colaborativa, when we're servicing families from Revere, East Boston, Lynn, Winthrop, all the neighboring communities, or even East Boston, it's La Colaborativa sometimes, hand-holding, even when that individual is in an office space with a licensed therapist. They don't trust easily. It has to be a La Colaborativa employee member sitting there with this parent who is talking about DCF services with the school, right? And these are things that we're not the experts. We are not licensed. We want to step away from the domestic violence conversations because we don't know, we're not experts in that area, but we have to step in.
Yeah.
We have to step in because otherwise this woman who's being abused does not have the courage to speak with this agency or does not have the courage to speak with this officer. Even throughout the years of La Colaborativa building the trust and the foundation that we have with the police department, we still have to step in. And that's the weight that these nonprofits carry, that even though they're not getting the funding for some of the services because honestly, they don't want to do the domestic violence work. That's not their bread and butter. Their bread and butter might be youth work. But still, they have to step into those conversations with DV and all these other services because of that trust that the community has built with them.
Thank you. Yeah. Kevin? Yeah. And you could just turn on your mic. So. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just echoing what other folks have shared to your question around like building capacity, I think, right, like this conversation around mental health and mental wellness, especially within immigrant communities, I think has really been exacerbated during the COVID pandemic, where just at a mainstream or broad public level, the conversation that we're now having about mental health and wellness was not a conversation that we were having before the pandemic. And during that time where folks were isolating, quarantining, the hardest hit were immigrant and refugee communities. And what we saw was that because of the lack of resources and gaps, that through some of the outreach that we were trying to do within Asian communities is that we were able to broaden and deepen our engagement within undocumented Asian communities because there was a need, but they weren't able to access. And so coming out of that, through some of the programming and work that Moya is doing through funding, like organizations that are doing alternatives to like formalize clinical mental health and wellness, that has been an opening area for us to really engage with immigrant and refugee communities around like what does mental health look like in a way that they trust us, that isn't like necessarily formal clinical practice where we know that that is a need, but that based off of their experiences when they have tried to go and access mental health and therapy or other formalized clinical health, the providers do not look like them, or because of status, they can't actually access it at like a free or low cost. And so that puts them into kind of this gray area of what resources are available. So yeah, I just wanted to name that in terms of, for us, there is a need around just really deepening what it looks like for community alternatives and investment in community alternatives for mental health and wellness.
Thank you.
In our case, we see on the Massachusetts TPS committee is when the kids find out that the parents are in danger to be deported, they were afraid to the family separation, but some of the kids do not want to speak about it. So we have the experience of a kid who doesn't want to go to school anymore. His father is next to me. And he talked with his son and say, no, we're going to keep fighting for it. I'm not going anywhere. But so many kids who find out during the campaign that the parents are under a temporal protected status, they start to suffer and they start to see like, what I'm going to go to school? I mean, if I'm going to be separate or I have to leave to another country that I don't know. And other thing that we saw the few months ago is that some kids turn already 21. They can apply for just the status of the parents, but they don't have the money to cover it because, as you remember, the fees and immigrations increase a lot. So now they say, okay, we can help our parents, but we don't have the money to. Mm-hmm. So it's really sad, but it's true. And how to mention to you, Julio passed for that situation with his kid.
Thank you. Thank you for your responses. I am grateful for all of for you being here. In the interest of time, that is my only question. I'm going to see if Councilor Media,
yes,
do you have
I do.
questions? Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sorry. And I have to leave, but I've been really patiently waiting because it's really important for me to stay here. So if you noticed me flustering, it's because I was supposed to be somewhere at 5:30, but this is so important to me that I stayed as long as I could. So I just wanted to uplift a few things. One, I'm so grateful to Eastie Mutual Aid for all of your work in this space. And Daisy, to that invitation, in terms of really making sure that we are leading with people who are doing the work. Our office has been in deep partnership with Dr. Tia Martin, Dr. Estrella Luna, and working to build the capacity of mutual aid groups because we know that those who are on the front lines have the relationship and the trust building efforts to support that work. So really excited about having you all at this table because when we talk about response, usually mutual aid groups are not at the table and talking to this work. So I'm really happy that you are here and uplifting that voice. So I think it's really important for us, even here at the city level, to really recognize that y'all need resources too. And in regards to, I love Claire, oh my God, just like that call to action around is gonna strike 12. You know what happens at the strike of 12 at midnight? Cinderella, okay, the pumpkin, hello, you gotta find that shoe. We can't continue to work under the circumstance of crisis. And as part of the 12-point program that we're going to put in place It has to be really looking at intervention, not always functioning in crisis mode, because we're going to find ourselves hearing the same stories, and nobody wants to come back to have the same conversation about something that was put on the record here, right? So I really do appreciate that call to action, so thank you for that. And in regards to the trauma piece, and I'm so glad that Councilor Louis-Jean introduced that as we are closing, because that is what I believe we should walk out of this chamber with, is understanding the traumatic journey that people take just to get here. And then when they get here, to get treated with disregard and disrespect just furthers that trauma. And I will say that there are families who are suffering in silence. I talk about the fact that my mom was undocumented for a period of time. And when I was a kid, I attempted suicide. But because my mom was too afraid to bring me to the hospital, I grew up believing that she did not love me. And so these are the stories that I carry in my heart when I think about the work that this city needs to do. Is that because people are afraid that they're going to lose their families, they'd rather not say or do anything to seek the support that they need. And I think all city services, every single department, not just Moya and not just housing, but every single department that exists in the city, every single hospital, every single bodega, every single multi-service center, every single hair salon, every single body in the city of Boston is responsible and should be invited to participate in how we're going to create safe spaces for those who need it most. So I think we can't just put it on ourselves. This has to be all hands on deck. And I'm glad that my sister city is here in the house, and we're looking forward to working alongside you all. Count on me as a partner, as a loud voice. Y'all know I don't mince my words. I'm here for it. Y muchas gracias por todo. Estoy bien agradecida que están aquí. Gracias. Clapping in the chamber.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. And I just want to thank this panel. I also just want to say, too, that, we, our families are dealing with trauma. We shouldn't have to over and over and over again repeat our stories of trauma for us to get the resources and the attention and the dignity affirming care that we deserve. And so I just want to thank you, and as I'm an elected official, work for government, want to apologize for all the ways in which government does not show up for us, and assure that you have the commitment of myself, obviously of Councilor Mejia, and of others on the City Council to do what we can to center the needs of our communities when that comes to how are we being more aggressive with shelter, how are we being more creative with how we're providing legal resources to our communities, how we're making sure that our budget is allocating resources to those who are on the front lines, our Black and Brown organizations, how are we building solidarity among our organizations and really learning from each other, because we have a lot to learn from the people in this room. So I want to thank all of you for being on this panel, for bearing with the time, and we're going to move on right now towards public testimony. We have a few people signed up to give public testimony. Thank you. I think we have one person on Zoom, John Riordan from Children's Hospital. John, we're going to pull you up, and then we're going to do the live testimony that we have here. I believe there are two folks here. So, John, thank you for being with us. You now have the floor. Generally, public testimony, especially at this late hour, is 2 minutes. So hopefully you'll be able to do it that. If you need a bit more time, though, I'll see what I can do.
I would be glad to keep it short. I just want to thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and members of the council for holding this hearing. And I have been listening to the amazing testimony that's already been given, and I applaud all of the organizations that are doing this great work. I'm here to talk a little bit about how the homeless family, both migrant and other, is coming into contact with the healthcare world in ways that we feel aren't in the best interests of the family and need to be addressed at other levels like state government. And so to that end, I wanted to read a testimony from a physician who works in our emergency department. She says, "My name is Amanda Stewart. I'm a physician in the emergency department at Boston Children's Hospital. In this role, I take care of ill and injured children from around the state, region, and world. One alarming trend that has occurred over the past years is families needing to seek shelter in our emergency room for homelessness. This trend has unfortunately accelerated in recent months with new immigrant families making up a larger share of our patients seen for homelessness than ever before. I'm sure you'll have heard the others say about the trauma these children and families have gone through before arriving in Massachusetts. I've cared for children who have lost parents, have witnessed extreme violence, even death in their journeys. There's no doubt that that trauma that these children have endured will affect their growing brains and bodies for years to come. But I also wanted to ensure that the committee is aware of the challenges that occur for the families that end up in our emergency department because of difficulties securing access to shelter. These families, like all others, arrive into our waiting room and walk up to a triage nurse who asks why they are there in the emergency room. Most reply with something along the lines of, "I have nowhere to sleep," because the vast majority of these children have no acute medical needs. Imagine the way a parent must feel in this moment. This conversation often takes place via interpreter, since many of these families speak languages other than English as their primary language, most commonly Spanish and Haitian Creole. They are then asked to wait in the waiting room until a room in the ER becomes available. As you may know, because of high volumes of respiratory illnesses, as well as medical and behavioral health borders, our emergency room is experiencing capacity crisis and frequently has long waits, even for medical patients who are placed into rooms before patients presenting for homelessness if they do not have any medical concerns. This means that homeless children and families in the ER often do not get a room until very late into the night, and many times spend the entire night trying to sleep on a bench in a busy emergency waiting room with sick and injured children all around them. This is not what the door to our shelter system should look like. When children do get a room, they see a nurse and doctor who perform a medical screening exam, typically a cursory exam, often given the fact that these children do not have medical needs. They work with our social work team, who, due to the long-standing barriers to accessing shelter, leading hundreds of families per year to come to our emergency room for homelessness for many years. They've become experts in navigating our complex shelter application process. We've had to hire additional social work staff because this process is so time-consuming for our already busy team. Issues of immigration status and intimate partner violence make this process even more complicated, or even the simple fact of having lost important documents that are necessary to qualify for shelter. Simplifying and expanding access to shelter would be extremely beneficial to Massachusetts families, including newly arrived migrant families, and would also ease the workload on already overburdened emergency rooms that have become a point of entry for many who have run into barrier after barrier trying to access shelter in our right to shelter state. Thank you for the work you're doing to try to improve this system, and please don't hesitate to reach out with questions. Amanda Stewart, MD.
Thank you, John, and thank you for your testimony and the work that you're doing at Children's Hospital. Next up, we have Larry Siemens with Family Aid. You can come down to that podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Larry Mikowski Siemens from Family Aid Boston. We're a frontline provider of homeless services here in the city of Boston. Tonight we have 4,000 children and parents in our care. We started as a mutual aid society 100 years ago to resolve a refugee crisis and a pandemic, and here we are 100 years later doing exactly the same thing. 50% of the children and parents we're working with are actually new arrivals to the United States and to Boston. And we provide trauma-informed, culturally competent care from our Black and brown staff who have lived experience themselves. The crisis is now, and to Councilor Meha's issue, I think it's the here and now. So I have some suggestions for the City Council about how we can tackle the issues right before us right now. Governor Baker has working with the state to develop a better intake system for families who are newly arrived to the city. However, those locations are Devens, which is outside the city of Boston, and Salem State. And there's no plan right now about how family and child-centered family, for those families who are already traumatized, of how they're going to get there. They're still going to have to come into the city of Boston. They're still going to have to get in line at Nubian Center DHCD offices, and they will be bounced back to the hospitals like Johns Hospital and Boston Medical Center because there's not a plan. I encourage the City Council to reach out to the Boston delegation, of which there are former City Council members, to fix the issues before that system is in place. That's our first recommendation. The second is that there is no housing option for families who are newly arrived to our city. The only option right now are two types of vouchers. The first are mass rental vouchers. They're called MRVPs, and I encourage the City Council to reach out to the Boston delegation to ensure that more MRVPs are allocated to newly arrived families here to the city of Boston, because that is a pathway to affordable housing. The second is the city has been very generous in creating something called city-funded vouchers. Councilor Fernandez-Anderson had mentioned them. The BHA has put those vouchers towards Boston Public School families who cannot access federal or state housing, so they're already being accessed, but there are only 55 of them. The City Council has within its power to expand that program to increase the value, first of all, for the vouchers that exist, because they have to help families in perpetuity until agencies like Family Aid and others can get them to either federal or state affordable housing opportunities, and to expand those vouchers to support more families who are newly arrived here to the city. Lastly, we are one of the agencies that are trying to expand the shelter system. You have mentioned multiple city buildings. There are convents and rectories and city buildings that are available here in the city. However, they've never been used for shelter or housing. And what's preventing us right now from expanding that system is that there are zoning laws and lodging house licenses that have to be streamlined in order to accelerate that process. And I do believe that's within the power of the City Council to call upon ISD and BPDA to streamline that process and accelerate it so that we can get some shelters here in the city that take the pressure off community-based organizations, church basements, and hospitals as quickly as possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Larry. And now we will move on to our last, unless there's anyone else afterwards, but our last sign up here for public testimony, Letitia Pierre-Louis. You're last, but you're not least. Thank you for your patience and for being here with us today.
Thank you.
You have the floor, and you can take 20 minutes, however long, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for holding this very important hearing. So my name is Letitia Pierre-Louis. I'm the Health Equity Coordinator at the Center to Support Immigrant Organizing, where we coordinate an immigrant health equity cohort called Equity Now and Beyond that's been tackling the COVID crisis and really building health equity beyond the pandemic. Now, as a representative from Equity Now and Beyond, I'd like to echo the words that many of the panelist members spoke out today, especially Pastor Key and Dr. Gerald Gabo, who we work very closely with. And as a Haitian immigrant myself, I recognize the need to really support many of the Haitian migrants and also other migrants who are here in Boston through no fault of their own. They have suffered violence, economic crisis, and political hardships, much of which is due to result of the U.S. policies within Haiti and other countries. And here they're here to really seek refuge. They're individuals just like ourselves, hardworking, intelligent people with so much to give, but often come here with no money and in need of support in order to begin their lives. Now, throughout my time volunteering at True Alliance Center and the Immigrant Family Services Institute, I've witnessed the hundreds of Haitian migrants coming into Pastor Kiki and Dr. Gabo's office looking for housing and other supports. Now, the rising housing markets have placed many of these families out of reach for shelter due to the lack of affordable housing. And I echo the need to utilize this emergency funding for temporary housing units for newly arrived Haitian and other immigrants. Now, for the past 2 years, Equity Now and Beyond has been tackling the many health inequities faced by various immigrant communities. The pandemic has really given the rise to the many gaps in our public health efforts. And housing inequities is a major public health issue. Housing is incredibly crucial for one's health. Without proper shelter, how are they supposed to prioritize their health? And it is one of the many factors leading to a further health disparity gap in our communities. Now, this housing crisis has not only affected the Haitian community, but also the African, Latinx, Brazilian communities, and other communities, as we've heard today. While we need support for the current crisis of immigrant coming to Boston, we need to support long-term services for those experiencing and at risk of homelessness. Now, here at Equity Now and Beyond, led by immigrant organizations such as the True Alliance Center, African Community Development of the African Community Economic Development of New England, Agencia Alpha, and Brazilian Women's Group, we're currently working on advocating for the redevelopment plan of the Shattuck Hospital into permanently supportive housing units. Now, this proposal is led by Boston Medical Center, and it proposes to build supportive housing with the inclusion of many wraparound services, including mental health supports, child care, and work enforcement services, as well as services to support those who suffer addiction. And it is intended to tackle the homelessness crisis experienced by many families in Boston. And we ask the city to also consider these plans to support housing security well beyond this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Letitia, and thank you to everyone who has come out today to either formally be on a panel, to listen, to my staff who supported this hearing, to all the panelists and our administration, and we know that the state is also listening and that we are going to continue to put pressure for a successful partnership. And I believe, the reason why we had so many panelists was to really center the voices of our communities that are on the front lines doing the work. And so I am appreciative of the call to actions that we've heard, and we will continue, especially as our budget season is coming up, to really think about how we are making sure we have a budget that expands to meet the needs of our immigrant communities and our new arrivals. It is incredibly important that we make space for those who are seeking refuge, and we will be doing the work a lot that has been really uplifted in this hearing. So I appreciate everyone for giving us your time, your talent, and energy. At this point, I'm going to call to a close docket number 1148, order for a hearing on the needs and services for migrant populations. This hearing will remain in committee. Thank you, and this hearing is adjourned.